Candlelight flickered across Kairos Blackwood's face as he stood frozen in his dining room, staring at the woman across from him. 7 years. 7 long, torturous years of emptiness, of shame so deep he couldn't speak it aloud, of nights spent wondering if he was cursed to live half a life forever. His hands trembled as he reached toward her, this gentle woman in a simple uniform who'd walked into his mansion just weeks ago. Tavia Stone met his eyes with a softness that terrified him. For the first time since his world shattered, Kairos felt something he thought had died. Hope. Not the hollow, desperate kind that fades with morning light, but real hope. The kind that whispers, maybe you're not broken after all. What you're about to hear isn't just a love story. It's the raw, gut-wrenching truth about what happens when betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your body. When the person you trusted most destroys you so completely that you can't even function as a man anymore. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved with everything in you? Have you felt that specific kind of pain, the type that doesn't just hurt, but fundamentally changes who you are? Maybe you've lain awake at 3 in the morning, replaying the moment it all fell apart, wondering what was wrong with you. Maybe you've tried to move on, tried to love again, only to find that something inside you just won't cooperate. Your mind says yes, but your body says no. And the shame of that silence is louder than any scream. If you've ever felt that kind of broken, this story is for you. Welcome back to Mr. Roman's Story Vault, where we don't just tell stories, we share truths that change lives. And if this is your first time here, welcome. You've arrived at exactly the right moment, because what you're about to experience will shake you to your core. But before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, pause and click it. Because stories like this, stories that expose the hidden wounds we all carry, stories that prove healing is possible even when you've given up hope, these are the stories that need to be heard. And when you subscribe, you're not just supporting this channel. You're joining a community of people who believe in second chances, who know that our deepest pain can lead to our greatest transformation. So, subscribe, turn on notifications, because you're going to want to be here for every story we tell. Now, let me tell you what you're dealing with here. Kairos Blackwood had everything a man could want. At 38, he'd built a tech empire from nothing, millions in the bank, a penthouse overlooking Seattle's skyline, respect in every boardroom he entered. But none of that mattered, because for 7 years, he couldn't be intimate with a woman. Not physically, not emotionally, not in any way that mattered. The doctors found nothing wrong. Every test came back normal. But Kairos knew the truth, even if he couldn't say it out loud. His ex-fiancée's betrayal hadn't just destroyed his heart. It had destroyed his ability to trust, to open up, to be vulnerable. And without those things, his body simply shut down, refused to cooperate, left him trapped in a prison of shame and silence, where wealth meant nothing and power was just a cruel joke. This is the hidden epidemic nobody talks about. When emotional trauma becomes physical reality, when the mind's wounds manifest in the body's refusal, when successful, powerful people suffer in silence because admitting this particular weakness feels like admitting you're not really a man at all. Kairos lived in that prison for 7 years. 7 years of loneliness, 7 years of watching other couples and feeling like an outsider to his own humanity, 7 years of believing he'd never be whole again. Until one rainy October evening, when Elite Home Services sent a replacement housekeeper to his door. Tavia Stone wasn't supposed to be his salvation. She was just there to clean his floors and dust his shelves. A single woman with her own hidden scars, her own secret shame, her own story of betrayal that had left her unable to trust any man's promises. She wore a simple uniform and carried cleaning supplies, and she had absolutely no idea that she was about to change everything. What happened between them wasn't instant magic. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something deeper, something more real. It was 2 broken people recognizing the brokenness in each other. 2 wounded souls who'd given up on healing, finding that maybe, just maybe, healing requires another person's patient presence. The truth of what restored Kairos Blackwood will absolutely wreck you. It will make you cry, yes. But more than that, it will make you believe again. In love. In healing. In the possibility that your story isn't over, no matter how broken you feel right now. So settle in. This is going to be a journey. And I promise you, by the end, you'll never be the same. October rain fell over Seattle like a curtain of silver threads, steady and relentless. The city stretched out beneath the darkening sky, thousands of windows glowing warm against the cold evening. Downtown towers stood shoulder to shoulder, their glass faces reflecting the scattered light of headlamps and streetlights below. Steam rose from subway vents. Taxis splashed through intersections. People hurried along sidewalks beneath umbrellas, heads down, eager to escape the wet chill. From street level, Seattle hummed with energy. The clatter of footsteps, the hiss of coffee, machines in corner cafes, the distant wail of a ferry horn cutting through the mist. But 30 stories up, the city became something else entirely. Quieter, removed, almost dreamlike. Kairos Blackwood stood on his penthouse balcony, hands gripping the rain-slicked railing. Water beaded on his charcoal cashmere coat, expensive fabric darkening with moisture. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes traced the skyline without really seeing it, focused somewhere far beyond the physical landscape before him. Behind him, through floor-to-ceiling windows, his penthouse glowed with muted elegance. Recessed lighting highlighted original artwork on pristine white walls. A chef's kitchen stood unused, stainless steel appliances gleaming like showroom displays. Leather furniture arranged in perfect symmetry, every surface clean, every item in its place. Beautiful, lifeless, a museum rather than a home. On a side table near the window, an untouched glass of champagne collected condensation. He'd poured it an hour ago with some vague notion of celebration, 7 years to the day since he'd closed his biggest deal, the acquisition that made him truly wealthy. But the champagne sat forgotten. Celebrations required joy, and Kairos couldn't remember what that felt like. The rain intensified, drumming against glass and concrete. Fat drops struck the balcony floor and shattered into spray. The wind shifted, carrying moisture onto his face, into his dark hair. Still, he didn't move. Something about the storm felt appropriate, fitting. Down below, brake lights painted red streaks across wet pavement. A young couple dashed across the street, laughing as they shared an umbrella, bodies pressed close for warmth and shelter. Kairos watched them disappear into a restaurant, swallowed by warm light and the promise of connection. His chest tightened. "Can I ever love again?" The words left his lips as barely a whisper, stolen immediately by the wind. But speaking them aloud, even to the empty air, made them real in a way that frightened him. For 7 years. He'd avoided that question, buried it beneath work and routine and carefully constructed numbness. Asking it now felt like opening a door he'd nailed shut. The rain responded with indifference, washing over everything equally. The expensive penthouse and the cheap apartments, blocks away. The monuments downtown and the forgotten alleys. Rain didn't discriminate. It simply fell, cleansing or drowning depending on your perspective. Tonight, Kairos wasn't sure which he wanted. Part of him longed to be washed clean, to have the past 7 years dissolved and swept away. To wake up tomorrow as the man he'd been before Elysia destroyed him. Before betrayal taught him that trust was just another word for vulnerability, and vulnerability was just another word for foolish. But another part of him, the tired, worn-down part that felt every one of his 38 years, wondered if drowning might be easier. Not literally, of course. He wasn't suicidal. Just done. Done pretending the emptiness didn't consume him. Done smiling at business dinners while feeling nothing. Done lying in bed each night, knowing he'd failed again at the most basic human connection. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, squinting at the screen through rain-speckled vision. A reminder from his assistant: new housekeeper arrives tomorrow, 6 p.m. Elite Home Services. Please be available for introduction. He'd forgotten. Mrs. Chen had quit 2 weeks ago, citing family obligations. He'd been managing alone since then, which mostly meant letting dishes pile up and ignoring the dust accumulating on surfaces. The cleaning service had finally found a replacement willing to work his schedule. Evening appointments twice weekly when he was home from the office. Kairos stared at the reminder for a long moment. Such a mundane detail. The hiring of household help. It should have meant nothing, barely registered as noteworthy. But something in his gut shifted. A strange sensation he couldn't name. He dismissed the notification and pocketed the phone. When he looked up again, the city had transformed. The rain was letting up, clouds breaking apart to reveal patches of darker sky beyond. Through the gaps, a few early stars fought through the urban light pollution, faint but persistent. The couple he'd watched earlier emerged from the restaurant, still laughing, still close. They walked slowly despite the drizzle, in no hurry to separate. Kairos felt the familiar ache of witnessing joy he couldn't access. But tonight, layered beneath the ache, something else stirred. Something so fragile he barely dared acknowledge it. What if? 2 words. A universe of possibility he denied himself for 7 years. What if healing was actually achievable? What if tomorrow, or next week, or next month, something changed? What if the prison he'd built around his heart wasn't as permanent as he'd convinced himself? The rain slowed to a gentle mist. Kairos finally released his grip on the railing, flexing fingers that had gone stiff with cold. His coat hung heavy with moisture. He should go inside, change into dry clothes, eat something resembling dinner, review contracts until exhaustion granted him a few hours of dreamless sleep. Instead, he stayed a moment longer, watching the city breathe below him. All those lives intersecting and diverging, all those stories being written simultaneously. Somewhere down there, in an apartment he'd never see, the woman who would change everything was probably finishing her own dinner, preparing for tomorrow, having no idea that her life was about to intersect with his in ways neither could predict. The clouds continued to part. More stars appeared. And Kairos Blackwood, tech millionaire, prisoner of his own pain, walked back inside his empty penthouse, with a strange, unsettling sensation that the universe was shifting beneath his feet. Soon, a new housekeeper would arrive. Soon, everything would begin to change. Kairos Blackwood's name carried weight in Seattle's tech corridor. At 38, he'd built Black Tech Solutions from a cramped studio apartment into a $50 million enterprise. The company specialized in cloud security infrastructure, the invisible backbone that kept hospitals, banks, and government agencies running safely. Boring work to most people, but lucrative beyond measure for those who understood its value. He'd started at 26 with nothing but student loan debt, and an algorithm he'd coded during sleepless nights in graduate school. No family money, no venture capital connections, just raw intelligence and the kind of relentless work ethic that bordered on obsession. 12 years later, Black Tech employed 300 people across 4 West Coast offices. Forbes had featured him in their 40 Under 40 issue 3 years running. Tech conferences paid him $15,000 just to speak for 30 minutes. To the business world, Kairos Blackwood was the definition of success. Self-made, brilliant, untouchable. They had no idea how completely that last word defined him. His typical day started at 5:30 a.m., before the sun crept over the Cascade Mountains. A workout in his building's private gym, treadmill at precisely 6.2 miles per hour for exactly 40 minutes, followed by weights according to a program his personal trainer updated monthly. Shower. Dress in one of 15 identical charcoal suits custom-tailored on Savile Row during his last London trip. Black coffee, no sugar. Scan the Wall Street Journal and TechCrunch while his driver navigated morning traffic to the Black Tech Tower downtown. By 7:15, he sat at his desk on the 20th floor, working through emails that had accumulated overnight from international clients. His office reflected his aesthetic: minimalist, efficient, expensive. A glass desk held 2 monitors and nothing else. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with technical manuals and business biographies he'd actually read. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay, offering a view worth more than most people's houses. The mornings blurred into a routine so practiced it required no conscious thought. 8 a.m. staff meeting with his executive team. 9:30 call with their Tokyo clients. 11 o'clock review of quarterly projections. Lunch at his desk. Salad from the same downtown restaurant, delivered daily at noon sharp. Afternoon meetings with potential investors, current clients, department heads seeking approval for budget increases. Kairos navigated it all with cool competence. He asked the right questions, made decisions swiftly, projected confidence that made others believe he had everything figured out. His employees respected him. His competitors feared him. His clients trusted him with their most sensitive data. None of them saw the exhaustion behind his eyes, the way his smile never quite reached them, the careful distance he maintained from everyone, even in rooms full of people. Evenings brought different obligations. Seattle's elite expected him at their charity galas, fundraising dinners, exclusive networking events. As someone who'd made his fortune young, Kairos understood these appearances weren't optional. Wealth came with social requirements. Show your face, write the expected check, make small. Talk with other millionaires about yacht clubs and vacation homes in the San Juan Islands. He attended dutifully. Black tie events at the Four Seasons, wine auctions benefiting children's hospitals, gallery openings in Pioneer Square, where contemporary art sold for prices that could feed families for years. Kairos moved through these spaces like he belonged, which technically he did. His net worth granted him automatic membership in circles that once would have been unthinkable for. A kid who'd grown up in a modest suburb, son of a postal worker and an elementary school teacher. But belonging and fitting in weren't the same thing. At every event, well-meaning acquaintances tried to set him up. Kairos, have you met Jennifer? She's a cardiologist at Swedish Medical. This is Amanda, recently divorced, runs a sustainable fashion startup. The women were invariably successful, attractive, age-appropriate. They smiled at him with interest, laughed at his polite jokes, touched his arm in ways meant to signal availability. He always found excuses. Too busy with a product launch, traveling to Singapore next week, just not in a place for dating right now. The brush-offs were gentle but firm, delivered with enough charm that feelings stayed intact. Most people accepted his disinterest as the eccentricity of a workaholic genius. A few assumed he was gay and deeply closeted, which he allowed because it was easier than the truth. The truth was so much worse than any assumption. By 9 or 10 p.m., Kairos would finally return to his penthouse. The building catered to Seattle's wealthiest, tech executives, professional, athletes, a retired Seahawks quarterback on the floor below him. The lobby featured security that rivaled airport checkpoints. The elevator required both a key card and a fingerprint scan to access the residential floors. His penthouse occupied the entire 30th floor. 4,000 square feet of luxury. He'd hired an interior designer to furnish. She'd done exceptional work. He could acknowledge that objectively. Marble floors in Italian Carrara, veined with gold. Original artwork from emerging Pacific Northwest artists. Furniture in shades of cream and grey, arranged to maximize the views from every angle. The chef's kitchen boasted appliances he'd used maybe 3 times. Wolf range, Sub-Zero refrigerator, an espresso machine that cost more than a used car. The designer had assured him that such a kitchen increased property value, so he'd approved the expense. But Kairos rarely cooked. Why bother when he ate most meals at the office or at business dinners? The living room contained a sound system engineered for perfect acoustics. The media room featured a projection screen and reclining seats worthy of a private cinema. The library held first editions he'd purchased as investments. Every room existed as a testament to wealth, taste, and complete emptiness. But it was the master bedroom he dreaded most. California king bed with sheets, changed weekly by his former housekeeper. Blackout curtains that blocked Seattle's early summer sunrises. A walk-in closet larger than his childhood bedroom. An ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub he'd never used and a shower with 6 different jets. At night, lying in that expensive bed, Kairos confronted the truth he could ignore during daylight hours. All of this, the penthouse, the company, the respect and recognition, meant absolutely nothing. He'd traded his youth and energy to build an empire, only to discover that Empires were cold comfort when you climbed into bed alone every night, when you couldn't even remember what it felt like to hold someone close, when your body had forgotten how to respond to desire because your heart had locked itself away so completely. Some nights he stood in front of his bedroom window for hours, watching the city lights blur together, wondering what the point of it all was. Success without connection. Achievement without joy. He'd won the game everyone said mattered, and the prize was this, a beautiful cage he'd built himself. In his home office, tucked in the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk beneath, tax documents and expired warranties, Kairos kept a single photograph. He never looked at it anymore, but he couldn't throw it away either. The photo showed him at 30, grinning widely, arm around a stunning woman with auburn hair and green eyes. Alicia. They'd just gotten engaged that day. He remembered exactly how he'd felt in that frozen moment, invincible, blessed, certain that life was unfolding exactly as it should. That certainty had died 7 years ago, on a December night that turned his entire world to ash. The photo stayed in the drawer, a reminder of the man he'd been before the betrayal, before the breaking, before he became this hollow version of himself who went through motions and collected accomplishments that brought no satisfaction. Kairos Blackwood had everything a person could want, and he had never felt more alone. The ghost of Alicia. 7 years ago, Kairos Blackwood believed in soulmates. He'd met Alicia Hart during his 2nd year at Stanford. She was everything he thought he wanted, brilliant, ambitious, beautiful in that effortless way that turned heads when she walked into lecture halls. Auburn hair that caught sunlight like fire, green eyes sharp enough to cut through nonsense, a laugh that started low in her throat and bubbled up genuine and warm. They'd both enrolled in advanced algorithm design, a notoriously brutal course that separated serious computer science students from those just chasing Silicon Valley dreams. The professor assigned partner projects. Kairos ended up with Alicia. That partnership became everything. Late nights in the engineering library turned into coffee dates. Study sessions became dinners. Within 3 months, they were inseparable. She understood his vision in ways no one else did. When he talked about building security infrastructure that could protect critical systems, she didn't just nod along. She contributed ideas, challenged his assumptions, made the concepts sharper. After graduation, while his classmates scattered to Facebook and Google, Kairos took the risk of starting his own company. Alicia joined him without hesitation. She became his first employee, his co-founder in everything but title. They worked 100-hour weeks from that cramped studio apartment, living on ramen and ambition. When investors doubted him, she was the one who believed. When clients hesitated, her charm closed deals, his technical explanations couldn't. Black Tech's early success belonged to both of them equally. Their personal relationship deepened alongside the professional one. Kairos fell completely, holding nothing back. Alicia became his entire world, his partner, his best friend, his future. He'd grown up watching his parents' stable, loving marriage, and he wanted that same foundation. Alicia seemed to want it too. On a December evening, 4 years into building Black Tech together, Kairos took her to Kerry Park overlooking the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle glittered against the dark water of Puget Sound. He got down on one knee with his grandmother's ring and asked her to marry him. She said yes with tears in her eyes. They set a wedding date for the following summer, June 15th. Alicia wanted an outdoor ceremony, something elegant but not ostentatious. They toured venues together on weekends when they could steal time away from the company. She showed him fabric swatches and talked about flower arrangements. He pretended to care about the difference between ivory and cream invitations because seeing her happy made everything worthwhile. Black Tech continued growing. By the time of their engagement, the company had 20 employees and was closing deals with major clients. Success felt inevitable. Everything felt inevitable. The business, the marriage, the life they were building together. Kairos had never been happier, had never felt more certain about anything. Then came December 15th, 7 years ago, the night his certainty shattered into pieces so small he'd never be able to reassemble them. He'd left the office early that afternoon, rare for him, but he wanted to surprise Alicia with dinner. Reservations at Canlis, the restaurant where they'd celebrated their first major client signing. She'd been stressed lately, distant in ways he'd attributed to wedding planning and work pressure. He thought a romantic evening might reconnect them. When he arrived at the penthouse they'd recently moved into together, he found it empty. Her laptop sat open on the dining table, screen still glowing. He wouldn't have looked. He respected her privacy completely, except a message notification popped up as he walked past. The preview showed enough. "Can't wait to have you to myself tonight." Told him yet? The sender, Marcus Donovan. Kairos's stomach dropped. Marcus ran CyberShield, Black Tech's primary competitor. They'd been locked in a bitter rivalry for the past year, competing for the same contracts, the same talent, the same market share. Kairos had always played fair. Marcus fought dirty, undercutting bids and spreading rumors about Black Tech's reliability. But this couldn't mean what it looked like. His hands shook as he opened her laptop. No password, they'd always trusted each other completely. The message thread with Marcus went back months, hundreds of messages. Kairos read them with growing horror, his world collapsing with each line. They'd been having an affair since July, 5 months. While Kairos worked late building their company, Alicia had been meeting Marcus, at hotels, at his apartment, anywhere they wouldn't be seen together. The messages were explicit, both sexually and emotionally. Marcus called her my love. She called him the one I should have chosen. There were discussions about her leaving Kairos. About her taking half the company in the split. She'd been consulting lawyers about her legal claim as an unofficial co-founder. About how much Marcus would enjoy destroying Kairos, both personally and professionally. The worst message came from 3 days earlier. "He's so blind. Actually thinks I love him. This is almost too easy." Kairos read that line 5 times before its meaning fully landed. She didn't just not love him anymore. She'd never loved him. Or if she had, it had curdled into contempt so complete she was playing him for a fool. He was still sitting at the table, numb and shaking, when Alicia came home at 9 p.m. She saw her laptop open, saw his face, and knew immediately. "Kairos, how long?" His voice came out strangled, barely recognizable. She didn't even try to deny it, just set down her purse with careful precision and looked at him with those green eyes he'd adored, now cold as winter rain. "Does it matter? Does it matter?" He stood, the chair scraping harsh against the floor. "We're getting married in 6 months. We're not." She said it simply, like stating a fact. "I'm leaving. Tonight. Marcus and I are going public with our relationship next week. I've already talked to a lawyer about my stake in Black Tech." The casual cruelty of it stunned him silent. She moved through the penthouse, collecting belongings she'd apparently already packed. A suitcase he hadn't noticed was missing from the closet. She'd been planning this, preparing. Why? The question ripped out of him. If you wanted out, why not just leave? Why marry me? Why? He couldn't finish. Alicia paused at the door, looking back with something that might have been pity if it had contained any warmth. "You were useful. The company needed both of us to get off the ground, but it doesn't anymore, and Marcus can offer me things you never could." She glanced around the penthouse with dismissal. "Goodbye, Kairos." The door closed behind her with a soft click. He stood frozen in the center of their home, his home now, unable to process what had just happened. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Eventually he collapsed onto the couch and stayed there until dawn, staring at nothing. The next days were a blur of agony. He couldn't eat without nausea, couldn't sleep without nightmares of Alicia and Marcus laughing at him. The humiliation was unbearable. She'd used him, mocked him, discarded him like he meant nothing, less than nothing. Kairos threw himself into work with manic intensity, 18-hour days, 7-day weeks. If he stayed busy enough, maybe he wouldn't think about her, wouldn't remember how completely he'd been fooled. His lawyer handled Alicia's attempt to claim partial ownership of Black Tech, since she'd never been officially titled as co-founder and had signed standard employment agreements. She had no legal standing. She left with nothing. It should have felt like victory, Instead, it just felt hollow. 6 months passed. Friends and colleagues urged him to move on, to date again. One of his investors introduced him to a woman named Claire, intelligent, kind, attractive. They went to dinner twice. On the third date, she invited him back to her place. Kairos wanted to say yes, wanted to prove to himself that Elysia hadn't broken him, that he could still function, still connect with someone. They kissed. She led him to her bedroom, and Kairos's body completely refused to cooperate. Panic flooded him as he realized what wasn't happening, what couldn't happen. His mind screamed at his body to respond. Nothing. Claire was understanding, assuring him it was fine. These things happened. But her kindness somehow made the shame worse. He left her apartment and didn't call again. The next attempt, 3 months later, ended the same way. And the one after that. By the fourth failure, Kairos was desperate. Something was deeply wrong with him. He saw his doctor. Blood tests came back normal. Testosterone levels fine. Thyroid function perfect. Physically, he was a healthy 31-year-old man with no medical explanation for his inability. His doctor referred him to a urologist. More tests, more humiliating conversations. Still nothing physically wrong. Finally, reluctantly, Kairos saw a psychologist who specialized in sexual dysfunction. Dr. Morrison listened to his history, the betrayal, the timing of symptoms, the pattern. What you're experiencing is psychogenic erectile dysfunction, Dr. Morrison explained gently. Your body is responding to psychological trauma. The betrayal was so profound that your nervous system essentially put up a defense mechanism. Intimacy equals vulnerability, and your mind associates vulnerability with devastating pain. So it shuts down the possibility entirely. Can you fix it? Kairos asked desperately. It's not about fixing, it's about healing the underlying trauma. That takes time and often requires you to feel safe with another person again. To rebuild trust. But Kairos couldn't rebuild what Elysia had demolished. Every time he considered dating, the fear paralyzed him. Fear of being used again. Fear of humiliation. Fear of that moment when his body would fail and confirm he was fundamentally broken. So he stopped trying. The years accumulated. 1, then 2, then 5. Friends stopped setting him up. Colleagues stopped asking about his personal life. The pitying looks faded into acceptance that Kairos Blackwood was married to his work. He told no one the real reason. How could he? The shame was suffocating. In a world where masculinity was tied to sexual performance, admitting he couldn't function felt like admitting he wasn't really a man. So he stayed silent and alone, building his empire while his heart remained frozen in that December night 7 years ago. 7 years of isolation, 7 years of believing he'd never heal. He'd resigned himself to it. This was his reality now. Some people didn't get happy endings. But maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about that. Listen, if you've ever felt broken by betrayal, if someone's cruelty has left you questioning your worth, hit that like button right now. You're not alone in this. Millions of people carry wounds they think make them unlovable. And I need you to stick with me through this story because what happens next will show you that healing is possible, that you're not permanently damaged, that hope exists even when you've given up on it. Kairos didn't know it yet, but his 7-year winter was about to end. Tomorrow evening, a woman would knock on his door, and everything would begin to change. While Kairos Blackwood stared at Seattle's skyline from 30 stories up, Tavia, Stone woke to the sound of her neighbor's baby crying through thin walls. 5:15 a.m. Her alarm wouldn't go off for another 15 minutes, but Tavia had learned long ago that sleep was a luxury she couldn't count on. She lay still for a moment in her narrow bed, listening to the familiar sounds of her apartment building coming to life. Footsteps on the floor above. The groan of old pipes as someone started their shower. The distant rumble of early morning traffic on Aurora Avenue. She opened her eyes to pale light filtering through curtains she'd sewn herself from discount fabric. Her studio apartment in the Greenwood neighborhood was small, just 400 square feet, but it was hers. Clean, safe, paid for with her own work. Tavia swung her legs out of bed and padded barefoot across the worn hardwood floor to her tiny kitchen. The space could barely fit one person, but she'd made it functional. She filled her coffee maker, a reliable Mr. Coffee she'd owned for 8 years, and measured out grounds while it heated. The rich smell began filling the apartment, covering the mustiness that always lingered in old buildings. While the coffee brewed, she moved to the corner she'd designated as her prayer space, a small cushion on the floor. A wooden cross her grandmother had given her years ago, hanging on the wall above. Tavia knelt and folded her hands, closing her eyes. "Lord, thank you for another day," she whispered. "Thank you for strength, for work, for provision. Guide my hands today. Let me be a blessing to whoever I serve. And please," she paused, swallowing against the familiar ache, "please help me trust again. Help me believe good things are still possible." She stayed there for 10 minutes, praying through her day, her worries, her hopes. This morning, ritual had sustained her through the hardest years. When everything else fell apart, when the world proved cruel and people proved unreliable, her faith remained. It wasn't always easy or comfortable. Some mornings, she prayed through tears, wrestling with God about why her life had taken the turns it had. But she showed up every day and laid her heart bare. Prayer finished, Tavia poured her coffee and stood at her single window overlooking the street. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A jogger passed below, earbuds in, breath fogging in the October chill. Across the street, Mr. Kim was already opening his corner grocery, rolling out crates of produce. Tavia sipped her coffee and studied her reflection in the window glass. 32 years old. Smooth brown skin, her mother always said was her best feature. Natural hair she wore in a neat bun for work, though on her days off she let it free. Tired eyes that had seen more disappointment than she'd expected by this age, but hadn't completely lost their hope. She turned from the window and began her morning routine. Shower in the cramped bathroom where the tiles were cracked but clean. Dressed in her work uniform, black pants, white, collared shirt, comfortable shoes that could handle hours on her feet. She applied minimal makeup, just enough to look professional and awake. Her apartment told the story of a life built carefully from limited resources. The couch had come from a thrift store in Ballard. She'd reupholstered it herself, watching YouTube tutorials. The bookshelf was assembled from discount pine, but she'd stained it dark to hide the cheap wood. The small dining table seated two and served as her desk, craft station, and meal spot. But scattered throughout were touches of beauty that mattered to her. Fresh flowers in a glass vase on the windowsill, tulips this week, purchased from Mr. Kim for $5. She allowed herself that small luxury every week because they made her smile. Photographs in mismatched frames showing her family, her mother in South Carolina, her younger sister who'd just started teaching in Portland, her late grandmother who'd raised her with fierce love and high expectations. Books lined the shelves, most borrowed from the library, but some purchased from used bookstores. Novels by Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou, a worn Bible with notes in the margins. Nursing textbooks she'd kept from her unfinished degree, unable to let go of the dream entirely. Tavia checked her phone while eating a quick breakfast of oatmeal and berries. A text from her supervisor at Elite Home Services waited. New client today. Kairos Blackwood, Belltown Penthouse. 6 p.m. appointment. High profile, needs discretion. Sending address details. She replied with a thumbs up, her stomach fluttering slightly. New clients always made her nervous. You never knew what you were walking into. Some people treated housekeepers with respect. Others acted like they were invisible, and a few treated them with outright disdain. Elite Home Services had hired Tavia 3 years ago, and she'd quickly become their most requested employee. Her supervisor, Patricia, frequently told her she had a gift for the work. Not just the cleaning itself, though Tavia was meticulous, but the way she carried herself. Professional, dignified, trustworthy. You treat every home like it's sacred space, Patricia had said during her last review. Clients feel that Tavia took pride in her work because it was work, and all honest work deserved excellence. She didn't care that society looked down on housekeepers, that some people acted like cleaning was beneath them. Her grandmother had cleaned houses for 40 years and raised 2 children. With that income, sent them both to college on a housekeeper's wages. There was honor in labor, regardless of what labor it was. Still, Tavia couldn't help thinking about the path that had led her here. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She'd been 3 semesters away from her nursing degree at the University of Washington when everything collapsed. 22 years old, engaged to be married, planning a future that seemed bright and certain. She'd worked so hard, juggling classes, clinical rotations, a part-time job at the campus library. Michael had supported her through it all, or so she'd believed. Then he left. The wedding that didn't happen. The devastating betrayal that shattered her focus completely. Without Michael's financial contribution, Tavia couldn't afford to continue school. She'd been paying her own tuition through loans and her library job, but he'd been covering rent, groceries, daily expenses. Suddenly responsible for everything, drowning in shock and grief, she'd had to make impossible choices. She took a leave of absence that became permanent. The loans still had to be paid. Rent was due regardless of heartbreak. She found work cleaning offices at night, then transitioned to elite home services when a friend recommended them. The pay was better, the hours more reasonable. That was 10 years ago. 10 years of telling herself she'd go back to school someday. 10 years of those nursing textbooks sitting on her shelf as reminders of who she'd meant to become. But Tavia had made peace with her reality, mostly. She was good at what she did. She earned enough to live independently, to send money home to her mother occasionally, to save a little each month toward a future that remained undefined but hopeful. And she'd learned to find beauty in small things. The satisfaction of transforming a messy kitchen into gleaming order. The trust clients showed when they gave her keys to their homes. The quiet moments alone in beautiful spaces where she could appreciate art and architecture she'd never afford herself. Her faith taught her that circumstances didn't define worth. She was valuable because she was loved by God, not because of her job title or bank account. Some days she believed that fully. Other days she had to remind herself firmly, speaking it aloud to her reflection until it sank in past the hurt. Today was a good day, though. She felt rested, steady. The morning light looked especially beautiful. And something about this new client assignment felt significant, though she couldn't explain why. Tavia gathered her cleaning supplies into a tote bag, checked her appearance one final time, and headed out into the Seattle morning. The bus ride to Belltown would take 40 minutes, but she'd scheduled plenty of buffer time. She never arrived late. As the bus carried her toward downtown, toward a penthouse she'd never seen, toward a man whose name she didn't recognize, Tavia whispered one more prayer. Let this be good, Lord. Whatever this is, let it be good. She had no idea she was riding toward the answer to 7 years of prayers. No idea the broken man in that penthouse needed her as desperately as she needed him. No idea that by evening, both their lives would begin transforming in ways neither could predict. The bus rolled on through morning traffic, carrying Tavia Stone toward her destiny. Tavia's hidden pain. 10 years ago, Tavia Stone believed in fairy tales. At 22, she was 3 semesters away from her nursing degree and planning a wedding. Life felt like it was finally coming together after years of struggle. She'd worked her way through community college, transferred to the University of Washington, maintained a 3.7 GPA while working 20 hours a week at the campus library. Her clinical rotations were going well. Professors praised her bedside manner. Everything she'd worked for was within reach. Michael Patterson was the cherry on top of a life that already felt blessed. They'd met in the library during her junior year. He was a first-year law student, handsome in that clean-cut way that made mothers smile approvingly. Dark eyes, easy smile, the kind of confidence that came from always being told he'd succeed. He'd asked her to help him find a case study reference, then kept coming back, with questions that seemed less about research and more about talking to her. Their first date was coffee at a cafe on the Ave. The second was dinner in Fremont. By the third, Michael kissed her goodnight and told her he was falling for her. Tavia fell just as hard. He was everything she thought she wanted. Ambitious. He talked about becoming a prosecutor, fighting for justice, making a difference. Attentive. He remembered small details she mentioned, showed up with her favorite tea during study sessions, called just to hear her voice. Supportive. He told her constantly how proud he was of her work ethic, how she inspired him to work harder. Her mother liked him. Her sister liked him. Even her grandmother, who was suspicious of most men, gave her grudging approval after meeting him at Thanksgiving dinner. He seems steady, Grandma had said. Treats you right. That's what matters. For 2 years, Tavia built her life around Michael. They studied together at his apartment near the law school, a nicer place than she could afford. She'd stay over most nights, and he'd make her breakfast before early clinical rotations. They talked about their future with the easy certainty of young people who hadn't yet learned how quickly life could change. He proposed on her 22nd birthday. Nothing extravagant. A modest diamond ring he'd saved for, dinner at a waterfront restaurant in Edmonds, sunset over the Sound. He got down on one knee and promised to love her forever, to build a life together, to support her dreams while pursuing his own. Tavia said yes with tears streaming down her face. They set the date for June 10th, exactly 1 year from the proposal. A summer wedding. She wanted something simple and meaningful. Ceremony at her grandmother's church, reception. In the fellowship hall, honeymoon they'd take later when they could afford it. Michael agreed to everything. He seemed just as excited, just as committed. The year of engagement was busy but joyful. Tavia balanced school, work, clinical rotations, and wedding planning. Michael was deep in his 2nd year of law school, plus a summer internship at a prestigious downtown firm that could lead to a job offer after graduation. They saw each other less than before, but Tavia understood. They were both building toward their future. She ignored the small signs that something was shifting. The way Michael seemed distracted during their dinners together. How he stopped asking about her day in detail. The times she'd call and he wouldn't answer, texting back hours later with apologies about being swamped with work. Law school is brutal, her sister reminded her. He's stressed. It'll get better after the wedding. Tavia believed that. She believed everything would be perfect once they were married. June 9th arrived. The night before the wedding, Tavia stayed at her apartment. Tradition dictated the bride and groom shouldn't see each other the night before. Her sister and 2 college friends were there, giggling over wine, painting each other's nails, talking about the ceremony tomorrow. Her wedding dress hung on the closet door, simple white satin that had taken months to save for. Her something borrowed, Grandma's pearl earrings. Her something blue, a garter her sister had given her as a joke. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., she'd walk down the aisle of Greater Faith Baptist Church and become Mrs. Michael Patterson. She fell asleep happy, surrounded by friends, dreaming of her future. Her phone rang at 6:30 a.m. Michael's roommate, Derek, his voice strained and uncomfortable. Tavia, is Michael with you? No, why would he be? We're not supposed to see each other until the ceremony. A long pause. He's not here, his car's gone. I thought maybe I don't know. Can you check if he texted you? She checked. Nothing. Unease crept through her chest. Maybe he went for a drive. Nerves. Yeah, probably. I'll keep trying him. But Michael didn't answer Derek's calls either, or his parents' calls, or Tavia's increasingly frantic messages. By noon, with guests starting to arrive at the church, panic had fully set in. Michael's parents looked ashen. The pastor asked quietly if they should delay the start time. At 1:15 p.m., Derek arrived at the church with something in his hand. An envelope. He pulled Tavia aside, away from the gathering crowd of confused guests. This was on his bed, hidden under his pillow. I went back to check. Tavia's hands shook as she opened it. Michael's handwriting, the same handwriting that had written her love notes, filled half a page. And Tavia, sigh, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I know this is the worst possible way to tell you, but I can't marry you. I've been trying to convince myself I could, but I can't. There's someone else. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. She's from my internship. We've been seeing each other since July. Thought I could end it, but I love her. I'm so sorry. Don't look for me. By the time you read this, we'll be gone. I'll send someone for my things. I'm sorry. Michael. The words swam in front of her eyes. She read them 3 times before their meaning fully penetrated. Someone else. Before their meaning fully penetrated. Someone else. Since July. Almost a year. While she'd been planning their wedding, choosing flowers, addressing invitations, he'd been with another woman. While she'd been falling asleep in his apartment, trusting him completely, he'd been lying to her face. The note slipped from her fingers. Her knees buckled. Derek caught her before she hit the floor. What followed was a nightmare of humiliation. Telling her mother, telling the pastor, watching as the church coordinator informed 200 guests that the wedding was cancelled. The pitying looks, the whispers, her grandmother holding her while she sobbed in the church bathroom, still wearing the robe she'd put on for hair and makeup. The wedding that didn't happen became the story everyone knew. Tavia Stone, the girl who got left at the altar. Poor thing. How embarrassing. How devastating. The details emerged over the following weeks, each one a fresh wound. The other woman was Victoria Chen, daughter of a partner at the law firm where Michael had interned. Wealthy family. Connected family. She could offer Michael opportunities Tavia never could. Introductions to powerful people, financial security, a lifestyle his ambition craved. Michael had calculated the cost-benefit analysis and found Tavia lacking. Simple as that. The emotional devastation was crushing, but the practical consequences were equally brutal. Michael had been helping with rent on her apartment. Without his contribution, she couldn't afford it alone. She moved back in with her grandmother, 22 years old and starting over. Worse, she couldn't focus on school. The betrayal had shattered something fundamental in her. She'd sit in lectures unable to concentrate, her mind replaying every moment with Michael, searching for signs she'd missed. During clinical rotations at the hospital, she'd have to excuse herself to cry in supply closets. Her grades plummeted. She failed 2 courses that summer. Between the emotional breakdown and the financial strain she'd spent, her savings on wedding expenses, continuing school became impossible. In August, 3 months after the wedding that didn't happen, Tavia withdrew from the University of Washington. 3 semesters away from her nursing degree, she walked away from everything she'd worked toward. Her mother was heartbroken. Her grandmother was furious, not at Tavia, but at Michael, at the unfairness of a system where women bore the full cost of men's cruelty. Her sister tried to help, but she was struggling herself, just starting her own career. Tavia had to survive. She found work cleaning office buildings at night, work that didn't require a degree that paid cash, that she could do while her mind was still shattered. She moved through those months in a fog of grief and shock. Slowly, painfully, she rebuilt. Therapy helped, though she could only afford it sporadically. Her faith helped more. She clung to the belief that God had a plan even when she couldn't see it, that this wasn't the end of her story. 3 years after the abandonment, she joined Elite Home Services. The work was better than office cleaning, daytime hours, better pay, a measure of respect. She was good at it. She found purpose in creating order from chaos, beauty from mess. But the wound Michael left never fully healed. She dated occasionally over the years, a dental hygienist she met at church, a teacher her sister set her up with, a mechanic who came to fix her car. Nice men, decent men, men who wanted more than she could give. Because every time a relationship started getting serious, Tavia would pull back. The fear was too strong. The memory of trusting Michael completely, only to be discarded like she meant nothing, paralyzed her. What if she opened her heart again and got destroyed again? She couldn't survive that twice, so she kept men at arm's length. Friendly but distant, open but guarded. She told herself she was being wise, protecting herself. But late at night, alone in her studio apartment, she knew the truth. Michael hadn't just left her at the altar. He'd stolen her ability to trust. 10 years later, Tavia still carried that scar, still felt the ache of dreams deferred, of becoming someone she never planned to be. still wondered if real love even existed, or if it was just a lie people told themselves. But unlike bitterness, she held on to hope. Fragile, flickering hope that whispered, maybe someday someone would prove trustworthy. Maybe someday she could risk her heart again. Maybe someday this pain would mean something. She didn't know that someday was today. October 3rd arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. 7 years to the day since Alicia Hart walked out of Kairos Blackwood's life, though he tried not to acknowledge the anniversary. Some dates embedded themselves in your memory, whether you wanted them there or not. Mrs. Chen had called his office 2 days earlier, apologetic and distressed. Her daughter in Vancouver had gone into premature labor. Complications. She needed to be there immediately, didn't know when she'd return. Kairos assured her it was fine to take whatever time she needed. Her family came first. Privately, the timing irritated him. His penthouse had descended into mild chaos over the past weeks. Dishes stacking up, dust gathering on surfaces, his usual order disrupted. He'd let it go too long. His assistant, Jennifer, had handled the replacement arrangement with her typical efficiency. Elite Home Services is sending someone tonight at 6. Their best person, actually, comes highly recommended. Very professional, very discreet. Fine, Kairos had replied, already thinking about the quarterly report demanding his attention. Now, as the clock approached 6 p.m., he found himself unexpectedly anxious. He'd given his other staff the evening off, his chef, his house manager, not wanting them hovering while he met the new housekeeper. People talked, especially staff, and he preferred his private life stayed private. He stood in his living room, hands in his pockets, watching the elevator indicator. The penthouse occupied the entire 30th floor, accessible only by private elevator with security clearance. Jennifer had arranged the access code for the new housekeeper. The elevator chimed. Kairos straightened his shoulders, arranged his face into polite neutrality. The doors opened. Tavia Stone stepped into his penthouse carrying a tote bag of supplies, and something in Kairos's chest tightened unexpectedly. She was beautiful. That was his first thought, immediate and unbidden. Not in the showy way of the women at charity galas with their designer dresses and professional styling. Beautiful in a quieter way. Warm brown skin. Natural hair pulled into a neat bun. Eyes that met his directly. Respectful, but not subservient. She wore the standard uniform, black pants, white-collared shirt, but carried herself with a dignity that made the simple clothes look intentional rather than required. Mr. Blackwood, her voice was soft but clear. I'm Tavia Stone, from Elite Home Services. Kairos moved forward, extending his hand. Ms. Stone, thank you for coming on short notice. Her handshake was firm, professional. But when their palms connected, something sparked between them. A charge of recognition, of awareness. Her eyes widened slightly. He felt it too, that inexplicable sense of significance. They both released quickly, stepping back. I understand Mrs. Chen had a family emergency, Tavia said, recovering her composure. I hope everything's all right with her daughter. He appreciated that she'd remembered the detail, that she cared enough to ask. Thank you. We're hopeful. Can I show you around? Please. Kairos led her through the penthouse, aware of her presence behind him in a way that felt disproportionate to the situation. She was the new housekeeper. This was a business arrangement, yet he found himself hyper-conscious of her footsteps, the faint scent of something floral, not perfume, maybe just her soap, that followed her. He showed her the kitchen first. I don't cook much. My chef usually handles meals, but he's off tonight. The real work is keeping surfaces clean, managing dishes. Tavia nodded, her eyes scanning the space with professional assessment. Gorgeous kitchen. Those counters are Calcutta marble? Yes. He was surprised she recognized it. My grandmother cleaned houses her whole life, Tavia explained, running a hand lightly over the stone. She taught me to identify quality. This is beautiful work. There was no envy in her voice, just appreciation. Kairos found that refreshing. Most people who entered his home either fawned excessively or projected resentment about the wealth on display. They moved through the living areas. Tavia asked practical questions about his preferences. Did he want books reshelved in any particular order? Were there surfaces she shouldn't touch? How often did he want linens changed? Smart questions. Thorough. In his study, she paused at the bookshelves. Her fingers traced the spines gently. You've read all of these. Most of them. Marcus Aurelius. Meditations. She pulled the volume out carefully, flipped it open. My grandmother used to quote this. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Kairos stared at her. That exact passage was underlined in his copy. Wise woman, your grandmother. She was... Tavia's voice softened. Passed 3 years ago. I miss her every day. I'm sorry. She replaced the book with care, turning to meet his eyes. She lived well, loved hard. That's what matters. Something in her words, or maybe in the gentle conviction with which she spoke them, made Kairos's throat tight. When had anyone last spoken to him about what mattered? About love and loss and meaning beyond profit margins? They continued the tour. Master bedroom. She noted it efficiently, professionally, no awkwardness about entering his private space. Guest rooms. Bathrooms. The media room he never used. Throughout, Kairos found himself watching her more than necessary. The way she moved with quiet efficiency, how she noticed details, a water stain on a side table, a window that needed better cleaning. Her competence was attractive in itself, but there was something else. Something in her eyes. Sadness. She carried sadness the same way he did, buried beneath functional daily life, but visible if you knew how to look. And Kairos, familiar with his own hidden pain, recognized it immediately in her. I think I have a good sense of the space, Tavia said as they returned to the main living area. Would you like me to start tonight? I have about 2 hours available. Please, if you need anything, I'll be in my study working. Don't hesitate to interrupt. She smiled, small, professional. I'll be fine. This is what I do. Tavia worked while Kairos pretended to review documents in his study. In reality, he was acutely aware of her presence in his home. The soft sounds of her moving through rooms. Water running in the kitchen. The faint hum as she worked. After an hour, he made himself get up, pour a glass of water, bring it to wherever she was working. Found her in the living room, dusting his bookshelf with meticulous care. Thought you might be thirsty, he said, extending the glass. Tavia straightened, surprised. Oh. Thank you, that's very kind. When she reached for the glass, their fingers brushed again. That same electricity. This time, they both felt it unmistakably. Both froze for half a second. Her eyes met his, pupils dilating slightly. Tavia took the glass carefully, stepping back. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Kairos. He heard himself say. You can call me Kairos. I should probably keep it professional. But her voice wavered slightly. He should agree, should maintain boundaries. Instead, he found himself lingering, watching her sip the water. How long have you been with Elite Home Services? 3 years. Before that, I did office cleaning. She hesitated. I was actually in nursing school before life changed direction. What happened? The question was too personal. He knew it. But something in him needed to understand her. Tavia's expression shifted, pain flickering across her features. Someone I trusted made choices that affected my path. I had to adapt. The careful phrasing told him volumes. She'd been hurt, betrayed, left to rebuild alone. I'm sorry, he said quietly. People can be cruel. Yes, she studied his face. You sound like you know that personally. I do. They stood there in his living room, two strangers who suddenly weren't strangers, recognizing damage in each other. The moment stretched, loaded with unspoken understanding. Tavia broke eye contact first, setting down the water glass. I should get back to work. Of course. But Kairos didn't move. He watched her return to dusting, her movements now slightly less steady, as if his presence unsettled her the way hers unsettled him. When she finished 2 hours later, he met her at the elevator. Miss Stone, Tavia, would you be available for regular appointments? Mrs. Chen worked Tuesdays and Fridays, 6 to 10 p.m. If that schedule works for you. It does, she answered too quickly, then seemed to catch herself. I mean, yes, I can arrange that. Thank you. Thank you. I'll have Jennifer confirm everything with your supervisor. The elevator arrived. Tavia stepped in, turned to face him. Their eyes met one final time. Good night, Kairos. His name in her voice did something to his chest. Good night, Tavia. The doors closed between them. Kairos stood there for a long moment, staring at the brushed steel doors. His penthouse felt different somehow. Warmer, less empty. In the descending elevator, Tavia leaned against the wall, heart racing. She'd felt something in that penthouse. Connection, recognition, danger. The man was her client, wealthy, powerful, completely out of her reach. And damaged. She'd seen it clearly. Whatever had happened to him had left wounds similar to her own. That should have made her want to run. Instead, it made her want to understand. The elevator reached the lobby. Tavia walked out into the October night, pulling her jacket close. Behind her and 30 stories up, Kairos stood at his window, watching her small figure disappear into the city. Neither of them slept well that night. Both of them counted the hours until Tuesday. Tavia arrived at Kairos's penthouse the following Tuesday at exactly 6 p.m. She rang the bell, supplies in hand, determined to maintain strict professionalism. Whatever she'd felt during that first meeting, the spark, the recognition, the dangerous pull, she'd decided to ignore. He answered the door in a different suit, same tired eyes. Tavia, come in. Mr. Blackwood. I thought we agreed on Kairos. It's more appropriate to keep things formal. She stepped past him, avoiding eye contact. If her coolness disappointed him, he didn't show it. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. That evening set the pattern for the next 2 weeks. Tavia arrived, cleaned efficiently, spoke only when necessary. Kairos worked in his study, reviewed documents, made calls. They orbited each other like planets, maintaining careful distance. But the awareness remained. Kairos found reasons to leave his study, refilling his coffee, checking his phone, standing at the window, always managing to be in whatever room Tavia was working. He told himself he was just ensuring she had everything she needed. The truth was harder to admit. Her presence made his empty penthouse feel less suffocating. Tavia noticed his hovering. She'd be dusting the living room shelves and sense him in the doorway, pretending to read something on his phone. She'd clean the kitchen and he'd appear to grab water he didn't drink. Always watching, never speaking, she noticed other things too. The way he worked constantly, even at home. How he'd eat dinner alone at his desk, barely tasting the food. The tension he carried in his shoulders, the absence of anything personal in his beautiful home. No photos of friends, no mementos, nothing that suggested joy or connection. This man, for all his wealth, was profoundly lonely. She recognized it because she knew that particular isolation intimately. Friday of the second week, as she prepared to leave, Kairos emerged from his study. You do excellent work. Mrs. Chen will be difficult to replace, but you're managing admirably. Thank you. Tavia adjusted her bag on her shoulder. How is her daughter? Better. The baby's in NICU, but stable. I'll keep them in my prayers. Something flickered in his expression. You actually mean that, don't you? You're not just saying it. I don't say things I don't mean, Mr. Blackwood. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Then Tavia stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed on whatever else might have been said. Tuesday of the third week. Disaster struck. Tavia was dusting the living room, carefully working around Kairos's expensive decor. A glass vase sat on a side table. Modern design, probably worth more than her monthly rent. She'd cleaned around it a dozen times without incident. This time, her elbow caught the edge. The vase toppled. Tavia lunged for it, missed. It shattered against the marble floor in an explosion of glass and water, flowers scattering across the expensive rug. No, no, no. She dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather the pieces. Kairos appeared in the doorway. What happened? I'm so sorry. Tavia's hands shook as she picked up shards. I'll pay for it. I don't know how much it cost, but I'll make payments, I promise. I'm so sorry. Stop. He crossed the room quickly. You'll cut yourself. I ruined it. I'm so... Tavia. He knelt beside her, gently taking her hands to stop her frantic gathering. It's fine. It's not fine. That vase was probably worth thousands. It was a gift from my ex-fiancé. Kairos started laughing, a rusty sound, like machinery that hadn't been used in years. I've hated that vase for 7 years. You just did me a favor. She stared at him. What? Alicia gave me that vase. I kept it because... He paused, still holding her hands, surrounded by broken glass. Actually, I have no idea why I kept it. Inertia, maybe. But I'm genuinely glad it's gone. His laughter was contagious. Despite her mortification, Tavia felt her lips twitch. You're serious? Completely. That thing was hideous. Modern art nonsense that cost a fortune and looked like something a toddler made. Now she was laughing too, relief flooding through her. It was pretty ugly. Terrible. He squeezed her hands gently before releasing them, suddenly aware they were still touching. Let me get the dustpan. Don't move. There's glass everywhere. He cleaned up the mess while Tavia watched, still kneeling on his expensive rug, feeling like the world had tilted slightly. He'd laughed, really laughed. The sound had transformed his whole face, made him look younger, less burdened, and he'd held her hands with a tenderness that made her chest ache. After the glass was cleared and the flowers disposed of, Kairos made tea. They sat in his living room, the first time Tavia had sat in a client's home while on duty. Tell me about her, Tavia heard herself say. Your ex-fiancé. Kairos's smile faded. Why would you want to hear about that? Because you've hated a vase for 7 years. That's a lot of pain to carry. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to talk. Not everything. He didn't mention his inability, the deepest shame. But he told her about Alicia, the betrayal, how it had broken something fundamental in him. Tavia listened without judgment, recognizing the shape of his wound because it matched her own. When he finished, she said softly, I was supposed to get married 10 years ago. He left the night before the wedding. I understand what it's like when someone you trust completely destroys that trust. Kairos met her eyes. I'm sorry. So am I. For both of us. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking tea, two damaged people acknowledging each other's pain without trying to fix it. After that night, the distance between them began to crumble. At weeks 5 and 6, Kairos started timing his dinner for when Tavia was there. The first time he asked her to join him, she hesitated. I should keep working. You're entitled to a break. And I'd appreciate the company. He said it simply, without pressure. Please. She agreed. That first shared meal was awkward. They sat at his enormous dining table, plates of food his chef had prepared earlier. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Tavia said, This weather is something else. Rain every day for a week. Welcome to Seattle in October. I've lived here my whole life. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. How long have you been here? Born at Swedish hospital. Never left. Seattle native. That's rare these days. The conversation was stilted, formal, but it was conversation. They made it through dinner without long silences, and when Tavia returned to work, she felt lighter somehow. Friday's dinner was easier. They talked about books. Tavia mentioned she was reading Octavia Butler. Kairos admitted he'd never read her work. You're missing out, Tavia said firmly. Here. She pulled out her phone, texted him a recommendation. Start with Kindred. You'll thank me. Tuesday of the 6th week, Kairos greeted her at the door, holding up his tablet. I finished Kindred. And, you were right, I stayed up until 3 a.m. reading. Couldn't put it down. Tavia grinned. Told you. That dinner, they discussed the book animatedly. Kairos appreciated the science fiction framework. Tavia loved how Butler explored trauma and survival. They debated character motivations, argued about the ending, and somewhere in. The middle Kairos realized he was enjoying himself in a way he hadn't in years. The third dinner that week, Friday, he asked about her family. Tavia shared carefully edited stories about her mother in South Carolina, her sister in Portland, her late grandmother who'd raised her. "She sounds like she was an amazing woman," Kairos said. "She was everything to me. When my wedding fell apart, she was the one who kept me together. Literally. I moved back in with her. She'd make me breakfast every morning and tell me, 'Baby girl, this pain is temporary. Your purpose is permanent.' Wise words. I try to remember them. Some days are harder than others." Kairos reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "I imagine they are." Tavia looked down at their joined hands. She should pull away. This was crossing lines, but his palm was warm, solid, and she couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her with such gentle understanding. She left her hand where it was. Weeks 7 and 8. The growing intimacy between them became undeniable. Kairos started sharing work frustrations, a client who was being unreasonable, a competitor spreading false information, the exhaustion of always having to be on, to project confidence he didn't always feel. Tavia listened and offered perspective that surprised him. "Sounds like you're carrying weight that isn't yours to carry. You can't control what competitors do. You can only control your response. When did you get so wise? Survival teaches you things." They discovered shared loves. Old jazz music, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, John Coltrane. Tavia mentioned it while cleaning, humming along to a song playing softly from her phone. Kairos recognized the tune immediately. "You like jazz?" He appeared in the doorway. "My grandmother played it constantly. It's comfort music for me. I have a collection. Would you like to hear some?" He led her to his rarely used music room. An expensive sound system, vinyl records filed meticulously. He put on Coltrane's A Love Supreme. The music filled the space, achingly beautiful. Tavia closed her eyes, swaying slightly. Then Kairos sat at the piano in the corner and began to play along. Tavia's eyes flew open. "You play?" "Not often anymore." But his fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease, improvising harmony to Coltrane's melody. Tavia began to hum along, her voice finding the spaces between piano and saxophone. Rich, soulful, gorgeous. Kairos's hands faltered on the keys. "Don't stop," she said softly. They made music together, him playing, her singing without words. The intimacy of it was almost unbearable. When the song ended, they stayed frozen, not looking at each other, both breathing too fast. "Your voice is beautiful," Kairos said finally. "Thank you." The moments of almost touching multiplied. Passing dishes at dinner, their fingers would brush. Reaching for the same book on his shelf, their hands would collide. Standing at the window looking at the city lights, their shoulders would touch, and neither would move away. The tension built like a storm gathering strength. Both of them felt it. Both of them fought it. Kairos would lie awake after she left, thinking about her laugh, her wisdom, the way she saw him, really saw him, past the wealth and walls. He wanted her in ways that terrified him. What if his body failed again? What if he tried and couldn't? The shame of that possibility kept him from acting on his feelings. Tavia would ride the bus home, her heart racing, mentally reviewing every word they'd exchanged. She was falling for her client. For a millionaire so far above her station, it was laughable. And even if the class difference didn't matter, she couldn't risk her heart again. Michael had taught her what happened when you trusted the wrong person. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she'd remember Kairos's hand covering hers, the way he looked at her like she mattered, how he listened when she spoke, really listened. 8 weeks after their first meeting, they existed in a state of exquisite tension, drawn together irresistibly, held apart by fear. Something had to break. Listen, have you ever felt drawn to someone but been too afraid to take the chance? When everything in you says this person matters but fear keeps you frozen? Comment below and tell me your story. Because what you're watching isn't just about them, it's about all of us. fighting between hope and fear. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's standing on the edge of something beautiful but can't quite jump. The storm was coming, and when it hit, everything would change. November 28th arrived with weather warnings scrolling across phone screens throughout Seattle. A major storm system rolling in from the Pacific. Heavy rain, possible flooding, wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Residents were advised to stay indoors after 7 p.m. Tavia saw the alerts but came to work anyway. It was Tuesday. She'd been coming to Kairos's penthouse every Tuesday and Friday for exactly 2 months now. 8 weeks of growing closeness that both thrilled and terrified her. When she arrived at 6, the rain was already falling hard, drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Kairos met her at the elevator, concern evident on his face. "You shouldn't have come. The roads are getting dangerous. I'm here." She shook water from her coat. Might as well make the most of it. But by 8 o'clock, the storm had intensified beyond prediction. Rain lashed the windows in sheets. Thunder rolled across the city. Tavia stood at the glass, watching trees bend in the wind far below, and felt a flutter of worry. "The buses have stopped running," Kairos said quietly behind her. He'd been checking his phone. "They've suspended service until the storm passes, and ride shares aren't accepting requests." Tavia's stomach dropped. "I can walk." "Absolutely not. You can't walk home in this. It's not safe." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Stay here tonight. I have guest rooms. You'll be completely comfortable and safe." She should refuse. This crossed every professional boundary. But the storm was truly dangerous, and the concern in his eyes was genuine. "Are you sure?" "I'm certain. Please." "Okay. Thank you." The decision made, a strange intimacy settled over the penthouse. Tavia wasn't leaving tonight. They had hours together with no defined end time, no schedule to maintain. The structure that had kept them safely distant dissolved. Kairos built a fire in the living room fireplace, a feature he rarely used but suddenly wanted. The flames caught, casting dancing light across the room. He poured 2 glasses of wine, offered one to Tavia. They sat on opposite ends of his leather couch, watching the fire, listening to the storm rage outside. The contrast was striking. Chaos beyond the windows, warmth and quiet within. 2 months, Kairos said softly. "Has it really only been 2 months? Since October 3rd. Feels longer, doesn't it?" "It does." "Like you've been—" He trailed off, uncertain how to finish. "Like I've been what?" "Like you've been here always. Like you belong here." Tavia's breath caught. She sipped her wine to hide her reaction. That's a dangerous thing to say." "Is it?" "You're my employer, Kairos. We need to maintain boundaries." "What if I don't want boundaries anymore?" He turned to face her fully. "What if I want to know you, really know you?" The firelight played across his features, highlighting the vulnerability in his expression. Tavia had never seen him this unguarded. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you're the first person in 7 years who's made me feel anything. And I need to understand why." The moment stretched between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Finally, Tavia set down her wine glass with trembling hands. "What do you want to know?" Kairos moved slightly closer on the couch, not touching, but nearer. "Can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, her heart racing. "Have you ever felt broken?" His voice was rough, uncertain. "Like a part of you just stopped working?" "Not physically broken, but something deeper. Something that should work, but can't anymore." Tavia understood immediately that he wasn't talking about abstract emotional pain. He was talking about something specific. Something that carried shame. "Yes," she said quietly. "I have. Tell me." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. "Help me understand I'm not alone in this." So Tavia did something she'd never done before. She opened the locked box where she kept her deepest pain and let it spill out. "After Michael left me at the altar, I thought I'd eventually recover. That I'd grieve and heal and move on." She stared into the fire, unable to look at Kairos while speaking. "But something broke in me that day. my ability to trust. For years, I couldn't even consider dating. When I finally tried, when I met someone who seemed kind and decent, I'd panic every time things got serious. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. I'd get close to someone, and then my mind would start screaming warnings. What if he leaves? What if this is a lie? What if I'm being used again? The fear was so overwhelming that I'd sabotage the relationship before it could destroy me. Her voice cracked. I've been alone for 10 years because I can't let anyone close enough to hurt me. That's what Michael took from me. Not just my wedding day, my ability to believe in love. The tears fell freely now, tracking down her cheeks. Kairos moved closer, his hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. I'm 32 years old, Tavia continued, and I'm terrified I'll never be able to open my heart again. That I'll spend my whole life protecting myself from pain that might never come, and miss out on everything beautiful in the process. That's what being broken feels like to me. Watching life happen to everyone else while I stand frozen. Tavia. Kairos finally took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. You're not alone. She turned to look at him. His eyes were wet too, his face stripped of every defense. I told you about Elysia, he said, about the betrayal. But I didn't tell you what it did to me. The part I've never told anyone. You don't have to. I need to. I need someone to know. He took a shuddering breath. She didn't just break my heart. She broke me physically. After she left, I tried to move on, tried to be with other women, and I couldn't. My body just shut down. The words hung in the air. Tavia squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. Every test came back normal, Kairos said, his voice breaking. Doctors said there was nothing physically wrong, but psychologically, I was destroyed. The betrayal was so complete that my mind associated intimacy with devastation, so whenever I tried, my body refused. Panic attacks, failure, shame so deep I wanted to disappear. A tear slid down his cheek. He didn't brush it away. For 7 years, I haven't been able to be with anyone. Not physically, not emotionally. I built walls so high that nothing could get through. I convinced myself I was protecting myself, but really I was just... His voice failed completely for a moment. I was just dying slowly, becoming less human every day. Oh, Kairos. Tavia moved closer, closing the distance between them on the couch. She brought their joined hands to her chest. You're not broken. You're not dying. You're protecting a wound that hasn't healed yet. How do you heal from something like this? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. She reached up with her free hand, gently touching his face. But maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not about healing alone. Maybe we need someone safe enough to heal with. Kairos leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. I haven't wanted to try with anyone. The fear of failing again, of confirming that I'm permanently damaged. It's been easier to just avoid it entirely. And now, he opened his eyes, meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Now I look at you, and for the first time in 7 years, I want to try. You terrify me, Tavia, because you make me hope, and hope is dangerous. You terrify me too, she whispered, because you're everything I swore I'd never risk myself on. You could destroy me. I would never... Michael said that too. With his whole chest he promised he'd never hurt me. And then he did. Fresh tears spilled over. How do I know you're different? How do I trust this? You don't know. I don't know either. That's what makes this terrifying. Kairos cupped her face with both hands now, his thumbs brushing away her tears. But I do know this. I see you. The real you. Not the housekeeper, not the station you occupy, not the version you present to the world. I see the woman who prays every morning, who finds beauty in small things, who carries pain with dignity. And that woman is extraordinary. Kairos, I haven't wanted to live in years. I've just been existing, going through motions, building success that means nothing, until you walked into my home and made me feel human again. Tavia was crying harder now, but not from pain, from the overwhelming vulnerability of being truly seen. I'm scared. So am I. I'm terrified that I'll try to be close to you, and my body will fail, and you'll see just how broken I really am. That you'll look at me with pity or disgust, and I won't survive it. I would never look at you that way. You say that now. I mean it. Tavia's voice was fierce despite the tears. Listen to me, Kairos Blackwood. You're not broken. Your body responded exactly as it should have to devastating trauma. It protected you. But you're not in danger anymore. Not with me. How can you be sure? Because I'm just as scared as you are. Because I've been where you are. Because we're both carrying wounds we didn't deserve. She leaned her forehead against his. Maybe that's why we found each other. Two broken people who understand that broken doesn't mean worthless. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, hands clasped between them. The storm raged outside. The fire crackled. And in the space between them, something shifted. Kairos pulled back just enough to see her face clearly. I haven't wanted to try. Until now. Until you. I haven't wanted to trust. Until now. Until you. What do we do with this? Tavia's lips curved into a trembling smile. I don't know. But I know I don't want to run from it anymore. Neither do I. So, what happens now? Now we be scared together. Kairos stroked her cheek gently. We take this one moment at a time. No expectations, no pressure, just us. Being honest and terrified and hopeful all at once. I can do that, Tavia whispered. So can I. They sat in the firelight, holding each other, both crying, both healing. The walls they'd built around their hearts for years were crumbling, brick by painful brick. Outside the storm continued, but inside, something warm and fragile and precious was beginning to bloom. The confession left them both raw, exposed, trembling. They sat on the couch surrounded by firelight, hands still clasped, faces wet with tears. The storm continued its assault on the city outside, but inside Kairos's penthouse, something profound was shifting. Kairos stood slowly, still holding Tavia's hand. Come with me. She rose without question, trusting him, though trust didn't come easy to either of them anymore. He led her through the penthouse to the dining room, the same space where they'd shared so many meals over the past 2 months. The room was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows. Kairos released her hand and began lighting candles, tall tapers in silver holders he'd never used, votives scattered across the sideboard, the centerpiece she'd dusted 100 times. He moved methodically, each small flame pushing back the darkness. Tavia watched in silence, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. This wasn't spontaneous. He'd planned this. Maybe not for tonight specifically, but he'd purchased these candles, placed them deliberately, hoping for a moment exactly like this. When the room glowed with soft golden light, Kairos moved to his sound system. Music filled the space, Billie Holiday's voice, rich and aching, singing the very thought of you. He turned to face her, extending his hand. Dance with me? Tavia's breath caught. I'm not a very good dancer, neither am I. We'll figure it out together. She placed her hand in his. He drew her close, one hand at her waist, the other cradling her fingers against his chest. They began to sway, barely moving, just holding each other while Billie sang about longing and desire. Tavia rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely Kairos. His heart thundered beneath her ear. He was just as nervous as she was. I can't believe you're real, he murmured into her hair. I was thinking the same thing about you. They turned slowly in the candlelight, not really dancing so much as holding each other upright. The song spoke of forgetting daytime duties, of seeing someone in dreams, of being consumed by thought alone. When the last notes faded, they didn't separate. Kairos pulled back just enough to see her face, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Tavia. Her name was a question, a prayer, a plea all at once. She answered by rising on her toes, closing the distance between them. The first kiss was tentative, gentle, questioning. His lips brushed hers softly, asking permission. She responded with equal tenderness, granting it. For a moment they stayed like that, just lips touching, breathing each other's air, both trembling. Then the kiss deepened. 7 years of loneliness poured into that connection. Tavia's hands slid up his chest to his neck, fingers threading into his hair. Kairos's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, like he could pull her into himself and never let go. The kiss was desperate and gentle all at once. Years of believing they'd never have this again, never feel desired, and safe simultaneously, never know the simple miracle of being held. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "Tavia, Kairos's voice cracked. "I want this. I want you. But I don't know if I can. What if—" She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. No expectations, no pressure, just us, right now, in this moment. "Whatever happens or doesn't happen is okay. What if my body won't? Then we'll just hold each other. And that will be enough." She kissed him again, softly. "You don't have to perform, Kairos. You don't have to prove anything. Just be here with me. Just feel—" His eyes glistened with fresh tears. "I'm terrified." "I know. So am I." "Then why are you so calm?" "Because I decided something tonight." Tavia stroked his face tenderly. "I decided that being terrified and taking the risk is better than being safe and alone. I've been alone for 10 years protecting myself from pain. And you know what? I've been in pain anyway. Loneliness is its own kind of agony." Kairos kissed her again, deeper this time. "I don't want to be alone anymore. Neither do I." He took her hand and led her back to the living room, to the couch where they'd confessed their deepest wounds. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. He added another log, and flames leaped up eagerly. They sat close, then closer. Kairos pulled a soft throw blanket around both of them. The physical closeness that had been building for weeks finally had permission to exist freely. Tavia nestled against his chest. His arms encircled her, and they simply held each other, letting touch speak what words couldn't. "Tell me if you want me to stop," Kairos whispered, kissing her temple. "At any point. Same to you." They kissed again, and this time neither pulled back quickly. The kiss lengthened, deepened, became something that pulled them both under like a tide. Hands explored, his fingers tracing the curve of her spine, hers pressed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate. Kairos pulled back suddenly, panic flashing across his face. "I can't. This is where I always—" "Breathe." Tavia's voice was steady, grounding. "Just breathe with me. You're safe. I'm not going anywhere." 7 years, he choked out. 7 years of failing at this exact moment. "You're not failing. You're healing. There's a difference." She took his face in both hands, making him look at her. "Listen to me. Whatever your body does or doesn't do right now doesn't define you, doesn't define us. We're not performing for an audience. This is just you and me, learning to trust again. What if I can't? Then we'll try again another time, or we won't. It doesn't matter, Kairos. What matters is that you're here, present, open. That's the real intimacy. Everything else is just mechanics." Her words, her patience, her complete acceptance began dissolving the panic. Kairos took a shuddering breath, then another. Tavia kissed him gently, no urgency, no demand. "Just connection, no rush," she murmured against his lips. "No pressure, just feel." "What do you feel right now?" "I feel safe. For the first time in 7 years, I feel safe." "Good. Stay there. Stay in that feeling." They kissed slowly, thoroughly, taking their time. Tavia let Kairos set the pace, following his lead while offering quiet reassurance. His hands trembled as they explored her arms, her shoulders, her face. She could feel him fighting the panic, fighting the old patterns of failure and shame. "You're doing beautifully," she whispered. "You're right here with me. I've got you." Something in his body released. The tension that had held him frozen for 7 years began to melt. His kisses became less frantic, more confident. His hands steadied, and slowly, miraculously, he began to believe he wasn't broken after all. "Tavia!" Her name came out choked with emotion. Something's different." "What do you feel?" "I feel everything. I feel alive. Tears streamed down his face, but they weren't tears of shame anymore. They were tears of relief, of release, of a man discovering he hadn't lost himself permanently after all. What happened next was tender, unhurried, and deeply private. Not a performance or a conquest, but two wounded people finding healing in each other's patient presence. Kairos discovered that in Tavia's arms, with her gentle encouragement and complete acceptance, his body remembered how to respond. The 7-year curse broke not through force or pressure, but through safety and love. When it was over, they lay wrapped in blankets on his couch, the fire casting dancing shadows across their tear-streaked faces. Kairos held Tavia like she was the most precious thing in the world, and she held him with equal reverence. "I thought I'd never feel this again," he whispered, his voice broken with joy. "I thought Elysia had taken this from me forever. She didn't take anything from you. She hurt you, yes, but you're still whole. You always were. How did you know I could do this when I didn't believe it myself?" Tavia kissed his shoulder. "Because I know what it's like to be afraid you're permanently damaged. And I know that fear is a liar. We're not broken, Kairos. We're just scared. There's a difference." He laughed through his tears. "We're definitely scared." Terrified, she agreed. "But we did it anyway." They lay in the firelight for a long time, talking quietly, sharing stories they'd never told anyone. Kairos told her about the shame of doctor visits, the humiliation of failed attempts, the years of believing he was less than a man. Tavia shared about dates she'd sabotaged, walls she'd built, the loneliness of protecting herself so thoroughly that no one could reach her. As they talked, the storm outside began to quiet. The rain gentled from a salt to a whisper. The wind died down. Dawn was still hours away, but the worst had passed. "Stay with me," Kairos murmured, his eyes growing heavy. "Not just tonight. Stay. I'm not going anywhere." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the blanket cocooning them, the fire dying to embers, two people who'd spent years alone, finally finding rest in another's arms. When morning light filtered through the windows, painting the penthouse in shades of pearl and gold, they woke still intertwined. The storm had passed completely. Seattle sparkled outside, rain-washed and renewed. Kairos opened his eyes to find Tavia watching him, a soft smile on her lips. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning." He kissed her forehead. "You're still here. I told you I wasn't leaving. I thought maybe I'd dreamed it. Not a dream. Very real." He pulled her closer, marveling at the simple miracle of holding someone without fear. "Everything's changed, hasn't it?" "Everything," Tavia agreed. Outside, the city came to life under clear skies. Inside, two people who'd thought themselves broken beyond repair held each other and dared to believe in new beginnings. The healing had begun. December arrived in Seattle with crystalline cold and early darkness. Holiday lights began appearing on buildings throughout the city, transforming the grey urban landscape into something magical. For the first time in years, Kairos noticed the beauty. For the first time in a decade, Tavia felt genuine joy during the season. They made their relationship official the first week of December. Tavia still came to the penthouse on Tuesdays and Fridays, but the dynamic had shifted completely. She was no longer his housekeeper. Not really. She was his partner, his girlfriend, the woman who'd restored him to life. Kairos insisted on still paying her, though. "You can't afford to lose the income, and I won't let our relationship cost you financially. It feels strange taking your money now. Then consider it payment for making my home feel like an actual home instead of a museum." He kissed her forehead. "Please, let me do this." She agreed, though she spent less time cleaning and more time simply being with him, cooking dinner together in his enormous kitchen, reading side by side on his couch, falling asleep in his arms and waking to his smile. But they also dated properly. Kairos took her to Canlis, the same restaurant where Elysia had once destroyed him, and replaced that memory with a new one. Tavia, in a simple black dress she'd found at a consignment shop, looking more beautiful than anyone in designer labels. They ate fresh halibut and talked for 3 hours, and when they left, Kairos felt lighter than air. He bought theatre tickets to see a production of A Raisin in the Sun at the Rep. They sat in the mezzanine, Tavia's hand in his, and when the final curtain fell, she had tears streaming down her face from the beauty of it. "Thank you," she whispered. "I haven't been to the theatre since college. We'll come every month," he promised. "Whatever you want to see." His favourite dates were the simplest ones, walking through Pike Place Market on Saturday mornings, drinking coffee and watching fishmongers throw salmon. She'd laugh at the tourists' reactions, and he'd watch her instead of the show, memorizing the way joy looked on her face. They held hands in public, kissed on street corners, acted like any normal couple. But they weren't any normal couple, and Seattle's elite social circles noticed immediately. The whispers started within 2 weeks. Kairos Blackwood, tech millionaire, dating his housekeeper. The scandal was too delicious for people to ignore. His business associates were polite to his face but clearly confused. At a December networking event, one of his investors cornered him. "Is it true you're seeing your cleaning lady?" "Kairos, there are appropriate women." "Her name is Tavia Stone," Kairos interrupted coldly. "And yes, we're together. Is there a problem?" The investor backed off quickly, but the judgment lingered in his eyes. Tavia faced worse. The looks from women in expensive clothes when she accompanied Kairos to business dinners. The subtle condescension in their voices when they asked, "And what do you do, dear?" "I work in home services," she'd answer truthfully, lifting her chin with dignity. "Oh, how nice." The worst came at a charity gala in mid-December. Kairos had invited Tavia as his date to a fundraiser benefiting Seattle Children's Hospital. She wore a dress borrowed from her sister, and Kairos thought she outshone every woman in the room. They were standing near the bar when a woman named Vivian Ashford approached. Old, money, plastic surgery, the kind of cruelty that came from never being told no. "Kairos, darling," Vivian air-kissed near his cheek. Her eyes raked over Tavia with obvious disdain. "Is this your companion for the evening?" "This is Tavia Stone, my girlfriend." "Girlfriend? How modern of you." Vivian smiled like a shark, "Though I suppose it's practical, dating the help. She already knows where you keep everything." The insult landed like a slap. Tavia's face remained composed, but Kairos felt her hand tighten in his. "Vivian." His voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze water. "Let me be absolutely clear. Tavia is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. She's kind, intelligent, dignified, and she's shown me more grace in 3 months than everyone in this room combined has shown in years. I'm in love with her, deeply, completely, and if you or anyone else has a problem with that, you're welcome to leave my life permanently." The silence around them was deafening. Several people had stopped to listen. Vivian's face flushed scarlet. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. Now, if you'll excuse us." Kairos guided Tavia away, his arm protective around her waist. Outside on the terrace, Tavia finally released the breath she'd been holding. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. No one talks to you like that. No one." She turned to face him, her eyes shining. "You told her you loved me." Kairos realized what he'd said. "I did, because I do." Is that okay?" "It's more than okay." She kissed him softly. "I love you too." They stood on the terrace under December stars, holding each other, while the charity gala continued inside without them. Neither cared what anyone thought anymore. Meeting families came next. Tavia arranged for Kairos to drive to Portland to meet her sister Maya, who was protective and skeptical until she saw how he treated Tavia. Then she pulled him aside. "You hurt her. I don't care how rich you are. I will end you." "Understood, but I won't hurt her. I promise you that." Maya studied him, then nodded. "Good. She deserves everything good in this world." Tavia's mother flew up from South Carolina for a weekend. Mrs. Stone was gracious but watchful, asking Kairos pointed questions about his intentions over Sunday dinner. "My daughter has already had her heart broken once. She barely survived it." "I know, Mum." "So have I." "I think that's why we understand each other." Mrs. Stone softened. "You love her?" "More than I thought I could love anyone." Then that's all that matters. Kairos had no family to introduce Tavia to. His parents had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and he was an only child. But he introduced her to his business partners and closest colleagues, making clear she wasn't temporary or casual. She was permanent. She was his future. Their relationship deepened through honest communication and mutual healing. When Kairos had moments of anxiety, fear creeping in that this was too good to be true, that his body might fail again, Tavia talked him through it with patience. It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too sometimes. But we're in this together. When Tavia had moments of distrust, seeing him text someone and feeling that old panic that he might be deceiving her, Kairos understood without judgment. Want to see my phone? I'll show you anything, anytime. No secrets between us. No, I trust you. I'm just working through old wounds. I know. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. They built something neither had experienced before, a relationship based on vulnerability, honesty, and the shared understanding that healing wasn't linear. Some days were easy. Some days were hard. But they faced all of it together. By Christmas, they'd become inseparable. Kairos gave her a key to his penthouse. Tavia brought her clothes over gradually until she was essentially living there, though. She kept her studio apartment as a safety net she wasn't quite ready to release. He understood. Trust came slowly for both of them. On Christmas morning, they woke in each other's arms as snow fell softly outside, rare for Seattle. Kairos watched Tavia sleep, overwhelmed with gratitude. 7 years ago, he'd believed he was broken beyond repair. 3 months ago, he'd resigned himself to loneliness. Now, he had this, had her, had hope and joy, and a future that looked nothing like his past. Thank you, he whispered to the universe, to God, to whatever force had brought Tavia Stone to his door. Outside, the city transformed under fresh snow. Inside, 2 hearts beat in sync, both healing, both whole. December 15th arrived cold and clear. 7 years exactly since Elysia Hart had walked out of Kairos's life, leaving devastation in her wake. For years he'd dreaded this date, let it pass unmarked while the memories haunted him anyway. This year would be different. Kairos made reservations at Altura, the upscale Italian restaurant in Capitol Hill, where Elysia had ended their engagement over expensive wine and heartless words. He hadn't returned since that night. The thought of walking through those doors had always made his stomach turn. But today he was reclaiming what she'd stolen, transforming his worst memory into something beautiful. Wear something nice tonight, he told Tavia that morning. I'm taking you somewhere special. She looked up from her coffee, curious. What's the occasion? You'll see. That evening, Kairos picked her up in his car, a sleek black Tesla he rarely drove himself. Tavia emerged from the penthouse elevator in a deep burgundy dress that took his breath away. Simple, elegant, perfectly her. You're stunning, he breathed. You clean up pretty well yourself. She adjusted his tie, kissing him softly. Now tell me where we're going. Patience. He drove through Seattle's evening traffic, Christmas lights twinkling on every street. His heart hammered against his ribs. The ring box in his jacket pocket felt impossibly heavy. When they pulled up to Altura, Tavia's eyes widened. Kairos, this place is expensive, I know. You're worth it. He came around to open her door, offering his hand. Trust me. Always. The maitre d' seated them at a corner table with soft lighting and a view of the city. Kairos had requested this specific table, away from the center of the room where Elysia had publicly dismantled him. New location, new memory. They ordered wine and appetizers. Tavia was relaxed, happy, suspecting nothing. Kairos tried to match her ease, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached across the table to take hers. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly. Her smile faded slightly, concern flickering. That sounds serious. It is. But it's not bad. I promise. He took a breath. 7 years ago today, I sat in this restaurant with Elysia. She'd asked to meet for dinner, and I thought we were celebrating. Instead, she ended our engagement. Right here, in this room, she told me she'd been having an affair and was leaving me. Tavia's hand tightened in his. Oh, Kairos, why would you bring me here? Because for 7 years this date has haunted me. December 15th was the day I lost everything. My fiancé, my trust, my belief in love. This restaurant became a symbol of my worst moment. His eyes met hers, intense and clear. But I don't want it to be that anymore. I don't want her to own this date for the rest of my life. So you're, what, replacing the memory? I'm redeeming it. He stood slowly, and Tavia's eyes went wide as understanding dawned. Kairos. He moved to kneel beside her chair, pulling the ring box from his pocket. Around them, other diners began to notice, conversations quieting. But Kairos saw only Tavia, her eyes filling with tears, her hand covering her mouth. 7 years ago tonight, I lost everything in this room, he said, his voice strong despite the emotion. Tonight, I want to gain everything. Tavia Stone, you walked into my life when I'd given up on living. You saw past the walls, past the wealth, past the brokenness. You showed me that healing was possible, that love was real, that I wasn't damaged beyond repair. Tears streamed down her face. He opened the ring box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. Not ostentatious, not trying to impress, just beautiful and honest like her. You healed me in every way a person can be healed, Kairos continued, his own voice breaking. You made me believe in myself again, in connection, in the possibility of joy. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me, that we're safe together, that this love is real. He took the ring from the box with shaking hands. Tavia Stone, will you marry me? She was sobbing now, nodding frantically, unable to speak. Finally she choked out, yes. Yes, yes, oh my God, yes. Kairos slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and stood, pulling her into his arms. She was laughing and crying simultaneously, and he held her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. Around them, the restaurant erupted in applause. Other diners cheered, raised their glasses, shared in the joy of strangers. The maitre d' appeared with champagne, compliments of the house. Kairos and Tavia barely noticed. They stood wrapped in each other, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. I love you, she whispered. I love you so much. I love you too. Thank you for saying yes. Like I could ever say anything else. They sat back down to finish their meal, but neither could stop staring. At the ring on her finger, at each other, grinning like fools. The food was excellent, but they barely tasted it, too consumed with joy. During the drive home, Tavia called her mother, putting the phone on speaker. Mama, I'm engaged. Mrs. Stone's shriek of joy was so loud Kairos laughed. Tell me everything. When? How? Let me talk to that man. Kairos took the phone. Hello, Mrs. Stone. Kairos Blackwood. You better take care of my baby. I will. I promise you, I will. Good. Now when's the wedding? I need time to prepare. They laughed, planned, dreamed out loud as the city lights blurred past the windows. Kairos had never felt more alive, more present, more grateful. 7 years ago, this date had destroyed him. Tonight, it had given him everything. As they pulled into his building's parking garage, Tavia leaned over and kissed him deeply. Take me upstairs and show me how happy you are. With pleasure. Future Mrs. Blackwood, I'm keeping my name, she teased. I don't care what you call yourself, as long as you're mine. They rode the elevator to the penthouse, hands intertwined, the ring catching the light. Everything had changed. Everything was beginning. June 10th dawned with golden sunshine and a breeze that smelled of salt water and blooming flowers. 10 years exactly since Tavia Stone had waited at Greater Faith Baptist Church in a wedding dress, only to learn her groom had abandoned her. Today, she would finally have her wedding. The ceremony was set for 4 p.m. at a waterfront venue on Lake Washington, not a grand hotel or exclusive country club, but a small community space with a dock extending over the water and cherry blossom trees in full bloom. Exactly the trees Tavia had wanted a decade ago. When Kairos suggested June 10th as their wedding date, Tavia had cried. "Are you sure?" she'd asked. "That day holds such painful memories." "So did December 15th for me," he'd reminded her gently. "We're in the business of redeeming painful dates, remember? Let's take this one back too." So here they were. Tavia stood in a small dressing room, her sister Maya adjusting her veil. The dress was simple ivory lace, fitted at the bodice and flowing at the skirt. Nothing like the elaborate gown she'd saved for years ago. This one was better, chosen with confidence, worn without fear. "You ready?" Maya asked, squeezing her shoulders. Tavia looked at her reflection. 33 years old, no longer the naive 22-year-old who'd believed love was simple. She'd been broken and rebuilt, had learned that healing was possible, that the right person was worth the risk. "I'm ready." Outside, 50 guests gathered in white chairs facing the water. Tavia's mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes already. Her extended family had flown in from South Carolina. Kairos's business partners and closest colleagues filled the other side, along with Patricia. From Elite Home Services and several clients Tavia had worked for over the years. Small, intimate, perfect. Cherry blossom petals drifted on the breeze as a string quartet began playing. Kairos stood at the end of the aisle with his best man, his CFO, James, who'd become a close friend. Kairos wore a charcoal suit and a smile so wide it transformed his entire face. Then Tavia appeared, her arm linked with her mother's since her father had passed years ago. Kairos's breath caught. She was radiant, not just beautiful, but glowing with joy. This woman who'd saved him, healed him, loved him when he thought he was unlovable. Tavia walked down the aisle seeing only him. The man who'd been patient with her fears, who'd proven himself trustworthy. Day after day, who'd shown her that love didn't have to mean pain. Mrs. Stone placed Tavia's hand in Kairos's, whispering, "Take care of my baby." "Always," he promised. The officiant, a friend of Tavia's grandmother, began the ceremony. But the real moment came during the vows they'd written themselves. Kairos went first, his voice strong despite the tears already forming. "Tavia, 7 years ago I was broken. I'd built walls so high I couldn't see over them. Then you walked into my life with your kindness, your dignity, your patient heart. You didn't fix me. You loved me while I learned to fix myself. Today I promise to love you boldly, to honor you daily, to choose you continuously. In good times and hard times, in joy and in sorrow, I will stand beside you. You brought me back to life. I will spend the rest of mine making sure you never regret it." Tavia was already crying. She took a shaky breath and began her own vows. Kairos, 10 years ago, I stood at an altar and learned that promises can be broken. I thought I'd never trust again, never risk my heart. Then you showed me what real love looks like, patient, honest, safe. Today, I promise to stand by you, to believe in us even when fear whispers lies, to never give up on what we're building. You've proven yourself worthy of my trust. I will spend our life together proving I'm worthy of yours. I love you, completely, forever." The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride." Kairos cupped Tavia's face tenderly and kissed her as cherry blossoms fell around them like snow. The small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was simple and joyful. Dinner on the patio as the sun set over the water. Toasts that made everyone laugh and cry. Tavia's sister telling embarrassing childhood stories. James revealing that Kairos had been impossible to work with for months, until Tavia appeared and transformed him into a human being again. Then the first dance. At last, by Etta James filled the evening air. Kairos held Tavia close as they swayed under string lights. "We did it," she whispered against his shoulder. "We really did. No more broken people. Just two whole people who found each other." They danced while their families watched, while the sky turned purple and gold, while the stars began appearing overhead. That night, in a honeymoon suite overlooking the water, Kairos and Tavia came together without fear or shame. Their love was tender and passionate, healing and whole. No anxiety, No distrust. Just two people who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger. "I love you, Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured afterward. "I kept my name," she reminded him, laughing. "I love you anyway." 10 years of pain redeemed in one perfect day. 2 broken timelines restored. A future spreading before them bright with possibility. Complete healing. Complete trust. Complete love. September arrived with cooling temperatures and leaves beginning their slow turn to gold. Tavia had been Mrs. Blackwood, though she'd kept stone professionally, for 3 months. Marriage suited them both. They'd settled into an easy rhythm of shared mornings, collaborative evenings, and nights wrapped in each other's arms. But lately, something felt off. Tavia woke each morning with waves of nausea that had nothing to do with anything she'd eaten. Her favorite coffee suddenly smelled repulsive. She was exhausted by 2 p.m., needing naps she'd never required before. And her period, usually reliable, was 2 weeks late. She tried to ignore the signs for several days. Stress, maybe. Adjusting to married life. But when she found herself crying over a commercial about puppies, she knew. On a Tuesday afternoon, she stopped at a pharmacy on her way home. Bought 3 different pregnancy tests because she wanted to be absolutely certain. Rode the elevator to the penthouse with her heart in her throat. Kairos was at work. She had the place to herself. In the master bathroom, she took all 3 tests, following the directions with shaking hands. Then she waited, sitting on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the timer on her phone. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. When the timer chimed, she looked. Positive. All 3. Unmistakably, undeniably positive. Tavia sat on the bathroom floor and laughed through tears. Pregnant. They were going to have a baby. They hadn't planned this, had talked about waiting a year or 2 before starting a family, but life apparently had other plans. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, wonder flooding through her. A baby. Their baby. Half her, half Kairos. A whole new person they'd created together. But nerves quickly followed the wonder. What if Kairos wasn't ready? What if this was too soon? They'd only been married 3 months, only known each other less than a year. She decided to tell him properly. Make it special. That evening, Tavia prepared his favorite meal, pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables. She set the dining table with candles, put on soft music, and she placed the 3 positive pregnancy tests in a small gift box, wrapped simply. When Kairos came home at 7, he stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. "What's all this? Can't a wife make her husband a nice dinner?" Tavia's voice was steadier than she felt. "Of course. It's just not a special occasion, is it? Did I forget something?" "No. But I have something to tell you, and I wanted the setting to be right." Concern flickered across his face. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. I promise. Sit. Eat first." They made it through dinner, though Tavia barely tasted her food. Kairos kept giving her curious looks, clearly sensing her nervousness. When the plates were cleared, she retrieved the small box from where she'd hidden it. "For you," she said, placing it in front of him. "Tavia, what?" "Just open it." Kairos unwrapped the box slowly, lifted the lid. For a moment he just stared at the 3 pregnancy tests, his brain processing what he was seeing. Then his eyes shot to hers. Are these? "I'm pregnant." The words came out on a whisper. "I know we weren't planning this yet, and if you need time to adjust I understand, but—" She didn't get to finish. Kairos shot out of his chair so fast it fell backward. He pulled Tavia into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, laughing with pure, unrestrained joy. "We're going to be parents?" His voice cracked on the words. "We're going to be parents," she confirmed, laughing and crying simultaneously. He set her down gently, immediately worried. "Should I not have spun you? Is that safe?" "Oh God, I don't know anything about pregnancy. I'm fine. We're fine." She cupped his face, seeing tears streaming down his cheeks. "You're happy?" "Happy? Tavia, I don't have words. This is—" He dropped to his knees, pressing his face to her stomach. "There's a baby in there. Our baby. Our baby," she agreed, running her fingers through his hair. They spent the evening talking about due dates and doctor appointments and how their lives were about to change completely. Kairos couldn't stop touching her stomach, marveling at the miracle happening inside her. A month later, October 3rd arrived, exactly 1 year since Tavia had first walked into Kairos's penthouse as his housekeeper. They'd scheduled her first ultrasound for that morning, the symbolism of the date too perfect to ignore. In the examination room, Tavia lay on the table while the technician spread gel across her stomach. Kairos held her hand, his palm sweaty with nerves. "Let's see what we've got here," the technician said, moving the wand across Tavia's belly. The monitor flickered to life. Kairos squinted at the grainy black and white image, unable to make sense of it. Then the technician paused, moved the wand slightly, and went very still. "Is something wrong?" Tavia's voice pitched with worry. "Nothing's wrong." The technician smiled. "But I'm seeing 2 heartbeats." Silence filled the room. "2?" Kairos repeated faintly. "2. Congratulations, you're having twins." The room tilted. Kairos's grip on Tavia's hand loosened. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the floor in a dead faint. "Kairos!" Tavia tried to sit up, but the technician gently pressed her back down. "He's fine. Happens more often than you'd think. Someone get him some water." A nurse rushed in with water and smelling salts. Kairos came to within seconds, disoriented and embarrassed. "Did she say twins?" were his first words. "Twins," Tavia confirmed, laughing despite her own shock. "You fainted?" "I've never fainted in my life." He sat up slowly, accepting water from the nurse. "Twins. 2 babies. 2. The technician confirmed cheerfully, pointing at the monitor. "See? 2 distinct sacs, 2 heartbeats. Fraternal twins, most likely." Kairos crawled to the examination table, pressing his forehead against Tavia's shoulder. "We're having 2 babies." "We're having 2 babies," she repeated, the reality sinking in. They drove home in stunned silence. Then, halfway there, Kairos started laughing. Tavia joined him. They laughed until they cried, overwhelmed and terrified, and more excited than either had ever been. The next months were a blur of preparation. Kairos transformed 2 guest rooms into nurseries, painting walls in soft yellows and greens. They built cribs together, Kairos reading instructions while Tavia handed him pieces. He bought every parenting book available, studying them like preparation for the most important business deal of his life. He talked to Tavia's growing belly constantly. "Hello in there. This is your father. I'm going to try very hard not to mess this up." Tavia glowed with happiness, watching this man, who'd once believed himself broken, prepare to become a father. The journey from that broken millionaire on the balcony to this, hands on her belly. Tears of joy in his eyes, building a family, was nothing short of miraculous. They were ready, scared, but ready, together. May 15th arrived at 38 weeks. Full term for twins, the doctors had assured them. Tavia had been enormous for the past month, her belly stretching to accommodate 2 full-sized babies. She moved slowly, slept poorly, and complained good-naturedly that she felt like a house. Kairos thought she'd never been more beautiful. At 2:30 a.m., Tavia woke to a contraction that took her breath away. She lay still, timing it, not wanting to wake Kairos unnecessarily. But when the next one came 12 minutes later, then another at 10 minutes, she knew. "Kairos!" She shook his shoulder. "It's time." He shot upright, immediately alert. "Time? Like time. My water just broke. We need to go." What followed was controlled chaos. Kairos had practiced this moment 100 times in his mind, but actually executing it was different. He helped Tavia into comfortable clothes, grabbed the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago, and called their doctor while guiding his laboring wife to the elevator. "Breathe," he reminded her as another contraction hit. "I am breathing," she panted. "You breathe." The drive to Swedish Medical Center took 15 minutes that felt like hours. Kairos broke several traffic laws and didn't care. Tavia breathed through contractions, gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles went white. At the hospital, they were rushed to a labor and delivery room. Nurses swarmed efficiently, getting Tavia into a gown, hooking up monitors, checking her dilation. The steady thump-thump-thump-thump of 2 heartbeats filled the room. "You're at 6 centimeters, the nurse announced. "These babies are coming today." Dr. Patel arrived at 4 a.m., calm and competent. "How are we doing, Tavia?" "I've had better mornings," she managed through gritted teeth. The next hours were a blur of increasing pain, breathing exercises, and Kairos, being far more nervous than Tavia despite her being the one in labor. He held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement, wiped her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're doing amazing," he kept saying. "So strong, so brave." "Easy for you to say," she gasped. "You're not pushing 2 humans out of your body. If I could do it for you, I would." Despite the pain, she smiled. "I know you would." By 6 a.m., Tavia was fully dilated and ready to push. The delivery room filled with medical staff. Dr. Patel, 2 nurses, a pediatrician for each baby. Kairos stood at Tavia's shoulder, one hand clasped in hers, the other stroking her hair. "Okay, Tavia," Dr. Patel said from her position at the foot of the bed. "Next contraction, I need you to push. Big push. Let's meet your daughter." Daughter. The word sent a thrill through Kairos. They'd known the genders for months, 1 boy, 1 girl, but hearing it now made it real. Tavia bore down with a strength Kairos didn't know existed. Her face contorted with effort, her grip on his hand crushing. He coached her breathing like they'd practiced, counting to 10 while she pushed. "Good. Again." Dr. Patel encouraged. "I can see her head. 1 more big push." Tavia gathered everything she had and pushed. A cry filled the room, high, indignant, utterly perfect. "She's here." Dr. Patel lifted a tiny, squirming baby into view. Born at 6:47 a.m. "Dad, you want to cut the cord?" Kairos's hands shook as he took the scissors and cut where directed. A nurse whisked the baby away briefly to suction her nose and mouth, then placed her on Tavia's chest. "Oh my God!" Tavia sobbed, looking down at her daughter. "Oh my God! She's perfect." She was. Tiny and wrinkled, covered in vernix, screaming her arrival to the world. Kairos touched one impossibly small hand with his finger, and the baby's fingers wrapped around his. His heart exploded. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, the nurse announced. Healthy and strong. But there was no time to rest. The second baby was coming. "Okay, Tavia, 1 more," Dr. Patel said. "Your son is ready." The nurse took the baby girl to the warming station so Tavia could focus. 3 contractions later, with Kairos still coaching and encouraging, their son entered the world at 6:52 a.m. His cry was deeper than his sister's, loud and demanding. Dr. Patel laughed. "This one's got opinions already." Kairos cut the second cord with steadier hands. When they placed his son on Tavia's chest beside his sister, Kairos couldn't see through his tears. 6 pounds, 5 ounces, the nurse announced. "Another healthy one." "You did it, Mama." Tavia lay back, exhausted and euphoric, 1 baby on each side of her chest. Kairos sat on the edge of the bed, 1 hand on each tiny back, and wept openly. "We have babies," Tavia whispered, her own face wet with tears. "Kairos, we have 2 babies." "We really do." He kissed her forehead, then each baby's head. "You're incredible. Absolutely incredible." After the medical team finished their checks and gave both babies perfect health scores, they were left alone, the 4 of them. Kairos held his daughter while Tavia cradled their son. The babies had quieted, their eyes closed, their breathing soft and even. "We need to give them names," Tavia said softly. They'd discussed options but hadn't decided definitively. Kairos looked down at the tiny girl in his arms. She had Tavia's nose, his dark hair. "I know what I want to call her." "What?" "Elise Joy." He met Tavia's eyes. Not Alicia, but close enough to redeem that name. And joy because that's what she brings. What they both bring. Fresh tears spilled down Tavia's cheeks. That's beautiful. And him? She looked at their son. What about Michael Hope? Kairos suggested, taking the name of the man who hurt you and transforming it into something good. Hope, because that's what our family represents. Tavia stared at him, then at the baby in her arms, Michael Hope and Elise Joy. Redemption names. We're taking the worst things that ever happened to us and declaring they don't have power anymore. Kairos shifted closer so they were all touching. A complete circle. These children are proof that our pain had purpose, that we had to go through what we went through to get here. To them, 7 years you waited, Tavia said softly, looking at him with overwhelming love. 10 years you waited, he replied. And now we have this. Them. Us. Kairos looked at his family, his wife, his daughter, his son. This man who'd stood on a rainy balcony believing he was broken beyond repair now held everything that mattered in his arms. I thought I was broken forever, he whispered, voice cracking. I thought Elysia took something from me I'd never get back. You were never broken, Tavia said firmly. Just waiting. Waiting for the right time, the right person, the right moment. 7 years of pain for a lifetime of joy. Worth it? He looked at Elise sleeping in his arms, at Michael nestled against Tavia's chest, at his wife who'd saved him in every way a person could be saved. Worth everything. They sat together as morning light filled the hospital room, as Seattle woke up outside the windows, as their new life began. 2 people who'd been shattered by betrayal, who'd believed themselves, damaged beyond repair, who'd found each other against all odds. 2 babies who would grow up knowing they were wanted, cherished, the living proof that healing was possible. 1 family, complete. 2 years have passed since Elise Joy and Michael Hope entered the world. The penthouse on the 30th floor stands empty now, listed for sale. Kairos and Tavia moved 18 months ago to a craftsman-style home in the Wallingford neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, a backyard with a swing set, neighbors who wave from their porches, smaller than the penthouse, warmer, filled with the chaos and joy only toddlers can create. On a Saturday morning in May, Kairos sits on the living room floor building block towers for Michael to knock down. The boy does so with gleeful enthusiasm, shouting boom with each destruction. Across the room, Tavia helps Elise navigate a puzzle, praising each piece she places correctly. The transformation in Kairos is remarkable. The man who once stood on a balcony, wondering if he'd ever feel alive again, now laughs freely at his son's antics, scoops his daughter into spontaneous hugs, kisses his wife without hesitation or fear. The tired sadness that used to live in his eyes has been replaced with contentment. He still runs Black Tech Solutions, but he's delegated more, works from home 2 days a week, never misses dinner with his family. Success matters less than it once did. Connection matters more. Last year, he launched the Blackwood Foundation for Trauma Recovery, a non-profit providing free counseling and medical support for people suffering from trauma-related health issues, particularly those dealing with psychogenic conditions stemming from emotional wounds. He funds it personally and sits on the board, using his story to reduce shame and stigma. If sharing what I went through helps even one person feel less alone, he'd told the press at the launch, then the 7 years of pain were worth it. Tavia blooms in ways she never imagined possible. The constant anxiety that used to shadow her has lifted. She moves through her days with confidence, secure in the knowledge that she's loved, chosen, cherished. The fear of abandonment still whispers occasionally, but Kairos's consistency over 3 years has quieted it to barely a murmur. 6 months ago, she enrolled part-time at Seattle University to finish her nursing degree. She attends classes 3 mornings a week while the twins are in daycare. It's slow going. She won't graduate for another 2 years, but she's finally reclaiming the dream Michael's betrayal had stolen. Kairos supports her completely, adjusting his schedule to handle morning drop offs, quizzing her with flashcards, celebrating every exam she passes. I'm so proud of you, he tells her constantly, and she believes him. Their marriage is strong, built on foundations of mutual healing and hard-won trust. They still have difficult days, moments when old wounds ache, times when fear tries to creep back in, but they've learned to communicate through it, to give each other grace, to remember how far they've come. The twins are thriving, bright, happy children who know nothing of their parents' painful pasts. Michael is bold and curious, constantly exploring. Elise is gentle and observant, preferring books to blocks. They're best friends already, inseparable. Sometimes, Kairos watches his children play and marvels at the journey that brought him here. From that rainy October night when he questioned whether love was even possible for him anymore, to this, sticky, toddler hands, scattered toys, his wife studying at the kitchen table while humming along to jazz music. This is wealth. Not the penthouse or the company or the bank account. This, family, love, belonging. Tavia catches his eye from across the room and smiles, the same smile that first made him believe healing was possible. He smiles back, his heart full. If you're watching this and you're broken, hear this clearly: you are not beyond repair. The damage you've sustained is real, but it's not permanent. If you've been betrayed, if someone you trusted destroyed your ability to believe in love, you can trust again. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually, with the right person who proves themselves worthy. If you think you'll never love again, you're wrong. Your heart is resilient. Your capacity for connection isn't destroyed, just protected. When you're safe, it will emerge again. Healing is possible. It's not a straight line. It requires vulnerability, patience, time, and often the gentle presence of someone who understands pain. Second chances are real. Your story isn't over. The chapter that broke you wasn't the final one. Love finds you when you're ready. Sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes through a woman in a simple uniform, carrying cleaning supplies. Sometimes through a broken millionaire who needs healing as desperately as you do. Your greatest pain can lead to your greatest purpose. Kairos's 7 years of isolation led him to Tavia and to a foundation helping thousands. Tavia's abandonment taught her the compassion she'll carry into her nursing career. Nothing is wasted, not even the worst moments. So don't give up. Don't resign yourself to brokenness. Don't believe the lie that you're permanently damaged. You're not broken. You're becoming, and your best chapter might be just beginning. Now, here's what I need you to do. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't wait. Don't scroll past. Click it. Because stories like this, stories that prove healing is real, need to be heard. Smash that like button if you believe in second chances. If you believe that betrayal doesn't have to be your final chapter. If you believe love can cast out fear. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. Someone who thinks they're too damaged. Someone who's given up on love. Someone who needs to hear that their pain has purpose. Comment below and tell me, what's your story of healing? What's your journey from brokenness to wholeness? I want to hear from you. This community is built on shared stories and shared hope. This is Mr. Roman's Story Vault, where every story has a purpose, where we don't just entertain, we transform. We remind each other that our struggles matter, our pain can be redeemed, and our best chapters might still be ahead. Remember this, you're not broken. You're becoming. Until next time, believe in your healing. Believe in your future. Believe in the possibility of love that makes you whole. Your Tavia or your Kairos might be closer than you think. Don't give up.